Hello, hello, hello. It's me again, the snarky juror. Thanks for stopping by. We are into day 19 of Massachusetts versus Karen Reed trial. Don't know who's on the stand, um, but we'll find out. This is the morning episode, and we will take it from there. It's amazing the things you notice on your wall. Can't see it straight up. See that out there on the wall? It's not an infirmity. It's a imperfection in the painting or something. Anyway, let's get back to the trial. That goes on and on and on. And hopefully we'll hear some interesting things today to keep us awake. Hopefully. There's always hope. So let's see what we find. I didn't cue that up very good, did I?
Forgive me, Your Honor.
Do we know who this is?
Anytime you're ready.
Thank you. Good morning, sir.
Morning, sir.
Would you please state your name and spell your last name?
It's Kevin Ohara, Ohara.
And how many employees, sir?
I'm a lieutenant with the Massachusetts State Police.
And how long in total have you been a member of the state police?
Just over 22 years,
And how long have you held the rank of lieutenant?
4.5 years.
And what is your current assignment within the Massachusetts State Police?
I'm the team commander for the State Police Special Emergency Response Team, which is also known as CERT.
And the CERT team within the state police, approximately how many members of that unit are?
We have 61 team members, 4 of which are full-time, including myself. The other 57 have other primary duty assignments, and CERT is an additional duty for them.
Now, generally speaking, what are sort of the duties and responsibilities, or what is the CERT unit within the state police does?
CERT is the primary search and rescue team for the state police. We conduct lost missing person searches, evidence searches. We do security or crowd control at large-scale events such as the 4th of July, the Boston Marathon, Gillette Stadium, dignitary security.
And how long have you been assigned to that particular group?
Since 2014.
Now, were you working with that unit on January 29th, 2020?
Yes, it was, sir.
And at some point in the afternoon on that day, were you contacted by Lieutenant Brian Tully of the state?
Yes, at 2:32 p.m., Lieutenant Tully gave me a phone call.
Now, as far as Lieutenant Tully is concerned, were you familiar with him? Were you familiar with what units he supervises?
Yes, I know he's the supervisor for the Norfolk County State Police Detective Unit.
Now, if you could describe to the jury sort of the process by which your particular unit is activated. Is that an instantaneous thing, or how does that work?
Normally, we'll receive a courtesy phone call, which is what I received from Lieutenant Tully, seeing if we were available. We had members that could respond today for an incident he had ongoing. I told him we would be available. He then has to submit a request through his chain of command, which is the Division of Investigative Services. I also have to submit a request up my chain of command, which is through Field Services. To get approval on my end, has to be approved by the Special Operations Commander, which is a major. And depending on the request, it may even go above his level to the Lieutenant Colonel who is in charge of the Division of Field Services.
So that initial call that you received about 2:32 in the afternoon, how would you characterize that first call?
Again, I'd say it was more of a courtesy notification, just to make sure we weren't on another assignment, that we had members who could respond that day. Obviously, there was the weather issue that day, making sure members could respond to the scene.
And the weather issue that day, what kind of weather issue?
It was a blizzard. I think most areas had received between 18 to 20 inches of snow.
Do we have to keep repeating
And
the same
as far
things?
as that initial phone call with Lieutenant Tully, as far as what was described to you, as far as the situation that you're responding to, or what, if anything, did he say?
He said they were conducting a death investigation in the town of Canton, and he was looking for CERT assistance with an evidence search.
And how did you respond to that request on that initial phone?
I told him we would have members that would be able to respond and that I would start working on the approval process. Looking out my own window, I hadn't been outside my house that day. I had large snow drifts at the end of my driveway. I told him building a roster and having members clear their driveway at least an hour plus on our response time.
And following that initial conversation, did Lieutenant Tully reach back out to you at some point?
Yeah, I'm not positive if he called me or if I called him. I think after I'd cleared my driveway, I spoke to my captain just to make sure, see what the status was on the approval process on our end. He said we were cleared on our end. So either Lieutenant Tully called me or I may have called him because I was getting nervous that now that my driveway was cleared, that the town plow was going to come back and bury the end of my driveway again. So I'm not sure who called who, but I called him and told him we were cleared through the Division of Field Services. He also told me that we were cleared on his end. The approval requests have been approved.
And do you know approximately what time of day it was that you had that second conversation with Lieutenant Tully?
It's probably about 3:45 because we sent out an alert to our team at 3:48 telling them that we were authorized to respond to Canton.
And as far as your team was concerned, can you speak a bit about sort of that process as far as the response and who was to respond and how you were able to sort of pull together the body?
Can you talk into the mic?
So CERT is
Charlie?
broken up. We're geographically dispersed across the state. So we have an East team, West team. I had reached out to a supervisor from the West team, someone I knew who I wouldn't request to drive that far in the snowy conditions, to set up a roster for us. So he sent out an alert to the team at 2:53, requesting an availability list. I told him to just confirm that the people responding either had a truck or some kind of four-wheel drive vehicle to respond.
And where was it that you were told, where did you eventually respond to?
Lieutenant Tully told us that we were going to 34 Fairview Road in Canton.
And from the time that you cleared your driveway, secured response from your higher-ups, about what time was it that you left, or how long did it take you to get from your home to 34 Fairview?
Well, like I stated, the alert went out authorizing the team to start responding at 3:48. I got the exact address via text from Lieutenant Tully at 4:10. We sent out another alert message at 4:17, just reminding people
Do
to
we
bring
have to be
shovels,
this
brooms,
detailed?
rakes, etc. I left my house at 4:13 in the afternoon, and I got on scene at 4:56. So it took me 43 minutes to drive there.
And from your house to that location?
Oh, come on, Lally.
Absent sort of the weather, how long a drive was that long?
Probably 20 minutes, sir.
And when you respond,
The last 10 minutes could have been done in 5 sentences.
Initially, we dispatched 8 members, including myself. Only 7 of us made it to the scene. One of the members could not get off his street. The end of his street had been plowed in by his town, and he had called his town DPW to try to get some assistance, but he was not able to make it to the scene. So we only had 7, again, after we initially started 8, which did kind of shift some of the dynamics of how we ran the search on scene.
and getting to that in a moment, when you first arrived on scene, I think anyone else preceded your arrival? Who was on scene?
Just one other trooper from CERT, Trooper Jay Bousselet, was on scene. I believe he arrived 2 minutes prior to my arrival.
Could you say that name again and spell it for us,
Yes,
please?
sir. It's Trooper Jason Bousselet. It's Beausoleil.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And Lieutenant Ohara, when you arrived on scene, where did you park in relation to the house, or where was Trooper Bousselet in relation to the house?
Trooper Bousselet was just past the driveway of the house, so just north of the driveway. I parked almost at the end of the driveway of 34 Fairview.
And you recall, at some point, your attention was directed to an area with a black hole and fire hydrant, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And do you recall which direction either of both of your vehicle and Led's vehicle were facing when you parked in that area?
Do we need to know this?
We're facing away from the flagpole originally. Eventually, we moved to Rabusale's vehicle back towards the flagpole. Just we wanted some extra headlights to light up the scene, the area we would be working in.
Now, Lieutenant Tully, was he on scene when you arrived?
He was not.
And at some point, did you reach out to him?
Yes, I gave him a call. He stated he was just leaving. Canton PD would be on scene in about 5 minutes. That was probably around 5 o'clock.
Now, as far as the house that you were parked in front of and as far as the residences on that street, who, if anyone else, as far as neighbors or anything like that, or people from the house did you see outside the house at any point in time?
We didn't see anyone outside the houses. A resident of 34 Fairview exited briefly after we were first on scene. That was the only person we saw.
And exited and came down to where you were, or where did that person?
No, he was, if you look at the house, you could consider 2 front doors, one closer to the garage, which would maybe be a mudroom or a den. Adult male exited from that door, had a hooded sweatshirt on. He asked us if we were here for what had happened earlier. We said yes, and he walked back inside the house.
Now, as far as you mentioned a bit about the snow, as far as the roadway conditions of the area where you were in, what if anything did you know or observe in regards to the roadway and how it had been treated with plow prior to your arrival?
The plow had really only cleared the center of the road. There was a good 3 to 4 foot snow drift coming off each side of the road. So maybe enough for 2 vehicles to pass, but not cleared curb to curb.
And
No, because at 3 o'clock in the morning, there was a car there. The plow couldn't come through.
What if anything, where did he direct?
He had instructed us that the death investigation involved a motor vehicle. He told us where the motor vehicle was believed to have been parked and wanted us to search from that area south towards the flagpole fire hydrant.
Now, as far as this type of search was concerned, what if any experience did you have doing this type of search in conditions?
In blizzard conditions, we've really never done evidence searches like this. We've done missing person searches we've gone out to, but for evidence searches, nothing like this. Something if a scene could be secured, we really wouldn't respond in a situation like this unless we really needed to.
Now, as far as the search that your team does, if you could, was it typical or was it not typical as far as conducting a search of an area that had already been gone over by another agency or by someone else from the state?
Yeah, we're a stage 2 response, so pretty much every search we've ever done has been previously searched. We're never really the first persons to search an area.
And can you describe sort of, sort of the difference between what you do as far as searching is concerned and sort of looking or making observations or things of that?
I think our training is a lot different than maybe the regular patrolman or trooper responding. There's not much training provided anymore in the academies. So we do extensive training through a lot of the search and rescue groups that we're a part of, which would be the National Association for Search and Rescue, which is NASAR. We do search and rescue initial actions. We do line searching, managing lost person incidents. We do multiple trainings a month with a team, which is different than what other personnel would get. I think traditionally, looking back to even my time before I was a member of CERT, a search would be, you go this way, I'll go that way. There was really no methodical approach to the search.
And as far as your training is concerned as it relates to this particular search, what if any, sort of methodical approach did you develop, or what did you employ in this?
We gridded off or marked off the area Lieutenant Tully thought would be the best area for us to search. So we had a starting point and an end point. Once all the members got on scene, we set up a line search, or what we would call a grid search, which again would just be a slow, methodical search with all of us working in unison, moving through the area.
And about how big an area was it that you initially sort of set out to search?
It was just over 50 feet, I believe. from the front door, which is the left door, looking at the house from the street to the fire hydrant, I believe it was 59 feet.
Was that length or width?
That is length.
And as far as the width of the area that you were searching, about what kind of area were you searching?
It's about 3 to 4 feet was the snow drift coming off the curb.
Now, as far as the information that you received prior to conducting the search, were there any items that were specifically identified as far as items that you might be looking for, or what, if anything, was given you in relation to that?
Yeah, Lieutenant Tully had informed us that the victim, in this case, was struck by a vehicle. He believed there would be broken pieces of taillight in the area. He also stated the victim was missing his sneaker. So he asked us to search for both of those items.
And sir, at some point, did you ask Lieutenant Tully any questions about the vehicle in question or anything in relation to that?
After we had found one or two of the pieces of the taillight, I asked him if we knew how much damage was to the taillight, or if he had a photo that we could get of the taillight.
And what, if anything, did he tell you?
He told us at that time the vehicle was being towed back to Canton PD, so he did not have a photo to show us.
And at any point, did he make any reference to who was coming along with the tow at Canton PD?
He said Sergeant Buchanan and Trooper Proctor were following the vehicle back to Canton PD.
You mentioned an alert that was sent out to troopers as far as to rank certain items. Can you describe to the jury sort of the process and what many tools or implements you use and sort of how that search was done?
So like I said, we moved Trooper Boussolet's vehicle to face the scene to give us some extra, uses headlights for extra lighting for the scene. All the team members also put on a headlamp, which would basically just be like a hiking headlamp. We all had shovels. We had a couple of rakes, the smaller garden rakes, just to kind of help us sift through the snow. And I also had a small push broom to move the snow around as well.
You mentioned sort of the headlamps and moving the vehicle as far as the headlights on the area that you were searching.
Searching for planted evidence,
What was the lighting conditions around that area at that time we were conducting?
in my humble opinion.
It was poor lighting. There really wasn't much as far as what we felt enough for street lighting, but with the headlamps, I mean, we had decent visibility.
So when you first arrived on scene about 4:53 p.m. or so, was it dark out there?
Yes, it was, sir.
It remained dark while you were still on scene?
Yes, sir.
And in the area that you were looking, your testimony, there wasn't much overhead sort of ambient lighting or street lighting in that area, as far as you recall?
Nothing that really helped the search.
So the area that you were searching was in the area of the fire hydrant, is that correct?
We started almost directly across from the front door and moved south towards Chapman Street, towards the fire hydrant.
And to be clear, as far as the area that you were searching with shovels and the other different implements to sort of sift through the snow, where was your focus as far as the street versus the front lawn?
Our right flank was on the curb, and then we moved out across the street from there. So we were lined almost shoulder to shoulder as we moved south through the area we were searching.
You're primarily searching or entirely searching along the roadway, is that correct?
Correct, sir.
And as far as some point that you, through the course of sort of shoveling and the removal of snow from that area, did you approach or come in contact?
Can you understand what he's saying? I can't.
We did, as one of the members who was working along the curb, he started to clear some of the grass on the front lawn. Yes, sir.
What, if any, issues did you encounter when you got to sort of the grass?
It was very difficult to clear the snow. I don't think we had very good visibility on what we were moving, even with the push broom and the rake. It was very difficult to definitively say we'd cleared the lawn properly. So we didn't focus too much of our efforts on that area.
Now, you referenced that only 7 members of your unit were able to respond because one got stuck in the snow at the end of the street, is that correct?
Correct, sir.
And that had some impact as far as documentation of the scene, is that correct?
Correct. Normally on a search, if I'm the overall As a team leader, I would run what you consider a command post or be the incident commander for CERT. I would stay behind the line and kind of document our efforts, but because this was such a small search area, it wasn't really an issue because we weren't breaking people off into teams. No one was out of my sight line, and we had multiple detectives on scene that were able to fill that role for me.
And so to that point, as far as the 7 members from your unit, in addition to the 7 members from your unit, with anyone else present during the course of that?
I believe there was 5 other members. I believe there were only 2 that I recognized from the state police, so I'm not sure who the other 3 were. If they were Canton detectives or Canton patrolmen, but they were all dressed in civil, plain clothes.
And as far as documentation for the scene, what, if anything, was done with reference to that?
As we began to find evidence, I spoke to Lieutenant Tully and just confirmed that he was going to document everything we were recovering via photograph and evidence log.
Oh, are we going to see photographs?
Documented with photos taken by Lieutenant Tully.
Yes, they were, sir.
And the items that were photographed, were they photographs prior to anyone touching them or moving them or placing them, other than those
Got monitor issues.
sort of related to the search effort?
Correct. As soon as we found anything deemed as evidence, we stopped our search efforts until they were documented by Lieutenant Tully.
And in reference to your search efforts, what, if anything, of evidentiary value did you and your team locate?
I found multiple pieces of red and clear taillight.
And where were they in relation to sort of the grid or the area that you assessed?
They were on the street in between the flagpole and the fire hydrant.
And sir, in addition to the pieces of red and clear plastic taillight that you uncovered, you know approximately how many pieces of that you were able to locate on that thing?
I believe maybe 6 or 7 pieces.
And how big or how small or did they range in size as far as the pieces that you located?
There was 3 larger pieces, 2 red, 1 clear, and then a couple of smaller pieces.
In addition to the pieces of red and clear plastic taillight that were uncovered during the search process, what, if any, other items of interest were located?
We found a sneaker.
And where was that sneaker located in reference to the scene, your search efforts, and in reference to pieces of clear and red plastic?
It was same location. Generally, it was in between the flagpole and the fire hydrant. The sneaker was flush up against the curb and it was upside down. I think we had found 1 piece of taillight prior to the sneaker, and then after we found the sneaker, we found a few more additional pieces of taillight.
Now, with reference to the sneaker and each of those pieces of red and clear plastic, where were they
Had to fix
in
my
relation
monitor.
to the snow that was being dug through, and by that, where were they in relation to the ground?
Can you repeat the end of that, sir?
Sure. With reference to each of the items of evidence that you're talking about, whether it be sneaker or the red and clear plastic, where were they in relation to the snow that you were digging into? Where were they in relation to the asphalt surface?
Close to the curb. As we started digging originally, the snowdrift, the snowpack was pretty solid from where the plow had kind of cleared to. So once we were able to move through that, we started getting into fresh, undisturbed snow, started moving through that, which was a lot easier to move at that point. And all the items we found were close to the curb.
And so my question also, sir, is sort of how deep within the snow that you were digging was each of those items?
They were all found at ground level.
Like right where
As far as the area that you
Ford
were
Edge was
searching,
parked?
beyond sort of snow drifts and plowing towards the middle of the road, how would you characterize that snow as far as observing footprints, tire tracks, or anything in that area where you were digging through and finding these items?
No, we did not see anything, sir. Like I said, it was all fresh, undisturbed snow once we got past where the plow had cleared up to.
Now, as far as this search being conducted sort of physically, you mentioned there's some sort of line that's set up, is that correct?
Correct, sir.
Can you describe to the jury sort of how that line was set up, what were the different functions in different parts of the line, and where were you in relation?
So like I stated, we had what we consider our right flank stood on the curb closest to the house, and then we moved left into the street. As we dug the snow out, it was originally inspected as they would pull their shovel out, make sure they didn't have anything in their shovel to the best of their ability. Then they would bring it out to the street. I was the left flank. They would dump it in the street, and I would sift through it at the end just to make sure there was no evidence that had come out to the street. Once I was positive nothing was in that snow, I would toss it onto the other side of the street. And we just continued that process as we moved south through that grid.
And the depth of the snow that you were digging through, how did that change, or how was that any different from sort of one portion of the section to another?
Where the plow had touched, clear to, would say that was probably about a 3+ foot in height. But as we moved into the snow itself, getting closer to the curb, that was in level with the rest of the area, what was on the front lawn, which was on the neighbor's lawn. So probably maybe 18 inches of snow.
And sir, as far as this search was concerned, about how long a period of time was it that you were on scene as far as searching, and how long a process are we talking about?
After Lieutenant Tully showed up, kind of informed us where we were going to search, we moved Trooper Boussolet's vehicle at 5:20, and that's when the rest of the team started to show up, right around 5:21, 5:24. A couple other members with extended response time showed up a little bit after that, but all members were on scene by 5:41. We had already started the process before they had all arrived on scene, and we were complete by 6:15. We started to wrap up and clear the area.
And as far as the wrapping up, how was that decision arrived at, and sort of what led to that decision?
So after we found the sneaker and a couple additional pieces of taillight, we moved south for, I'd say, over 5 feet, maybe closer to 8 to 10 feet, without finding any other pieces of evidence. So Lieutenant Tully and I had a conversation. He was very satisfied that we had found everything we were going to locate at that time, and we decided to suspend the search.
And what was, as far as you were concerned, the weather conditions and everything that had gone on, of course, was located at that point. What was sort of your thought process in relation to any sort of continuation of the search at some later?
I told Lieutenant Tully, we'll do a debrief at the end. We'll go over probability of detection, how I feel, whether we would have found everything that was there. I told him that there was a good chance we did not find everything. I said if you wanted us to come back in the daylight, which give us better lighting to search, or after a couple of days, the weather was supposed to warm up. If you wanted us to come back after there was some snow melt, just to reach out to me, and we would come back.
And as far as suspending the search at that point, was that something that was your decision independent of Lieutenant Tully?
No, that was in consultation with Lieutenant Tully.
So he didn't make the decision.
You mentioned
He relied on Tully.
Buchanan and Proctor, or you received information that they were following a vehicle to the station. Is that correct?
Correct, sir.
At any point in time that you were on scene, did you know either Sergeant Buchanan or Trooper
Did you
Proctor?
put the items?
Yes, I know both of them, sir.
And at any point in time that you were on scene, did you see either Sergeant Buchanan or Trooper Proctor in the area of critical failure during the entire time you were there?
No, they were not on scene.
So the other sort of troopers that you mentioned around, they were not, correct?
They were not there, no, sir.
Now, as far as the securing of evidence, how was that done? Generally speaking, in relation to searches that your unit conducts, and how was it done in this facility?
So we don't recover evidence. We'll stop and halt our search. Sometimes we've been waiting for crime scene to show up for 2 hours before we've continued to search. So once we found the first piece of taillight, again, I conferred with Lieutenant Tully, asked him if he was documenting it and recovering everything. He stated he was. Once we felt comfortable that he had done that properly, we then continued the search.
So once you get sort of that initial parameters as far as where and what you may be looking for from Lieutenant Tully, is Lieutenant Tully directing your search efforts in any way, shape, or form?
He is not, no.
And is that typical as far as how searches will be conducted?
Correct, yes. Yeah, they let me run the search the way I deem best.
Sir, in addition to photographs, what if anything else was done to document this?
Can't wait for the defense.
We had one of our members
Question.
use a handheld GPS, which we use a Garmin 64 ST, and he marked each item we found, which we then can upload later to a map, which we did later that evening.
If you could just describe to the jury that process as far as mapping is concerned, as to how mobile positioning system or GPS is utilized in creating that.
Correct. So the Garmin GPS we use, it connects to 4 different satellites to get you a best range of your location. There obviously is some range error involved with GPSs, but he was able to stamp 3 of the items, or 3 pieces of the tail light. But as he was marking those items on his GPS, they kept, because they were in such close proximity, they were almost marking directly on top of each other. So he only marked 3 of them because it was just going to clutter the map as we continued if we were to mark all the pieces we
Can't have
located.
that.
So with respect to the 3 pieces of taillight that were marked on the diagram, excuse me, were those the larger pieces, smaller pieces, or something?
They were the larger pieces, sir.
May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
Yes.
Your Honor, can he find a microphone and tape it to him? I guess these are pictures of the items. Good. Something we can look at instead of listening to wah, 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 wah. I guess Yavante's going to be doing the cross.
Sir, I'm showing you a series of 24 photographs. Actually, briefly, I'm going to ask you in a moment if you recognize.
He's the Botox prosecutor. What takes other people for your items and
Do you
tells
recognize what's in those
Takes-
photographs, sir?
4 hours.
Yes, sir. It's the area we searched and some of the evidence that we recovered.
Your Honor, the Commonwealth will seek to introduce and admit as the next exhibits.
Will you quit
Any
mumbling?
objection, Mr. Yannetti?
There is no objection, Your Honor. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
He was standing right there by the microphone, and I still couldn't understand what he was saying. You don't have anything to me?
Only being marked. May we approach quickly?
All right.
Oh, I'm sorry. She needs to have her attention on the mark. I'm sorry.
That's why they need 2. I don't know why they only use 1 person to do that. You need a clerk of courts who does all of this stuff, and you need the court recorder. Is that a microphone there on the stand? Not the stand, the podium. If it's right there, why can't we hear him? Or has he not been there?
Jimmy.
Who's Jimmy? And who's asking for Jimmy? We've actually got closed captioning today. I stumbled upon it early, but it's not always available. I heard rumors that she may testify, she being Karen Reed. But a lot of people, a lot of professionals don't believe she needs to, unless something awful really happens. She doesn't need to. About the time I go to fast forward anything, because I am not doing this live. They get done.
Sometimes it takes a while. We're fortunate we've got such a great court reporter here to take care of this for us, but sometimes it takes a while. I caution counsel that maybe you can all work together so that we don't do this, take up any extra time. All right, do you need those photos back, Mr. Lally?
Yes. And maybe your thoughts on that, Ron?
All right.
Witness, Ron?
Yes.
What you have before you is laser pointer, just click on that point on the screen with eye running that sheet.
Okay, thank you.
Lieutenant O'Hara, it's going to be good. We're going to know that. Lieutenant O'Hara, what you have up on the screen before you, is that what you have as Exhibit 134?
Oh,
I'm sorry, 111.
Hold on, might be backwards here. Yes, 111, sir.
And if you could describe to the jury that if you, using that laser pointer, what if anything is
what if anything? What?
This is the flagpole in front of the house. As you move south, this appears to be one of the pieces of taillight that we recovered.
And sir, Ms. Gilman, if you could zoom back out a little. Now, as far as when you're conducting the search and when the actual searching process is ongoing, what was the weather doing while you were doing it? Is that visible in this photo?
Yes, because of the air conditioning. So you need to speak up really loudly if you don't have a microphone in front of you.
And so, Lieutenant, during the course of the process as you're conducting this search, what was the weather doing, and is that something that you can observe in this photo?
It was still snowing, and you can see some of the snowflakes falling here by the flagpole.
As far as the wind was concerned, what if any impact did the wind have on the course of the search that you conducted?
It was windy, but it really didn't impact how we were searching through the area.
And sir, if I could direct your attention to the next photograph on the top.
It's the same damn thing.
Okay.
And again, sir, what's up on the screen, is that what you have before you?
Yes, it is.
It's sort of a different perspective of the same area that you were talking about in the last photograph, is that correct?
Correct.
If I could have the next photograph, 113.
Oh my God, Lally,
Again,
Botox.
screen, is that what you have?
Fill it up.
113.
Yes, it is.
make it look like more than what it is.
Closer perspective to the piece of taillight that you were referring to, is that correct?
Correct.
I could have the-
3 photos showing the same thing,
Okay, you really have to speak up.
maybe 4.
Again, Lieutenant, what's up on the screen, is that what you have before you?
Yes, it is.
Again, a closer up image of that same piece of tail light as it was observed when you covered it.
4 photos for the same thing.
Correct. And you can see right here to the left of the taillight, that is the molding of a shovel. So this piece of taillight was picked up with one of the team members' shovels. And as they overturned it, you can see the taillight came up as they were searching through the area. And this is kind of the markings of the shovel itself.
And the next photograph.
So we're going to have to turn the air conditioning off for this. We can't hear you at all.
The issue is I'm trying to move away from the podium.
I understand. So we need to turn the air conditioning off so that we can hear you. Yes, please.
And again, Lieutenant, what's up on the screen, is that what you have before you as the next?
Yes, it is.
We're going to get a microscopic view of it now.
You can see the piece of taillight that we recovered. And again, this is kind of the overturned snow from the shovel. And again, seeing the markings from the shovel from where it was overturned.
And the next photograph is still. This particular piece, is this one of the larger?
This is Botox.
Describing earlier.
This is one of the larger pieces, sir.
And,
That's
as
the
far
same
as
one.
length, size of it, if you know, how much would you estimate it? How big it was?
It gets a couple of inches, but well, I didn't measure it, sir.
And this gentleman, if I could have the next photograph. And Lieutenant, if you could describe to the jury sort of what is depicted or what, if anything, is significant to observe in this photo.
So this is the CERT members working through the area again, working on as a line through the grid formation. One of the things we stress is your critical separation, making sure you're close enough to each other that you won't miss a piece of evidence. If you're too far apart, you will miss that. A lot of times before searches, we will take an item of similar sized item that we're looking for, and we'll space out. Because this was such a condensed search area, we just had the team members stand almost shoulder to shoulder as they search through the area.
And the next photograph is done. And again, sir, if you could describe to the jury sort of what we're looking at, or what, if anything, of significance you observe in this.
Maybe a little difficult to see from a distance, but right here, this is the sneaker that we recovered.
And as far as the airing of the.
Now that needs a
you
closer.
indicated that the sneaker was recovered in relation to where is that?
It's flush up against the curb.
Again, I'm sorry, using the laser.
Oh, I apologize, sir. Right here, this would be the curbing right here.
And the next photograph is going.
Isn't that the curb that they cleared off?
What, if anything, do you observe in that photograph? What we-
That's a closer photo of
In
the
the morning?
sneaker. Sneakers in the bottom, right down here.
The next photograph. And again, what, if anything, are we looking at in this photograph, sir?
Again, you're looking at the sneaker. This is just a closer zoomed in photo. And this would be the curbing right here.
And the sneaker, as it's portrayed in this particular photograph, is that as it was when it was recovered?
Yes, sir.
The next photograph is going. The other side of that sneaker, is that correct?
Correct, sir.
And is that fixed sort of its relation to the curve that you were describing earlier in your testimony?
Yes, sir. You can see the curbing right here.
The next photograph.
I'd be interested to get a picture of that night when they cleared off. Why were they clearing off the
Where
curb?
was the snow in relation to, was it?
They took
on,
all the way down
around,
to grass for some
Where was the snow in relation to this?
The sneaker was completely buried. It wasn't until we started digging through the snow that we found the sneaker.
The next photograph. This is how it was discovered, is that correct?
Correct, sir.
Or how it appeared when it was discovered?
Yes, sir.
Next photograph, Mr. Tillman.
Not much difference between that picture and the other one.
And sir, in this photograph, if you could, using the laser pointer, draw the jury's attention to what, if anything, of significance you observed.
This is Exhibit 125. It's the photo I have in front of me. This might be difficult for them to see, but this is a clear piece of the taillight right here.
And the next photograph, Mr.
And we're going to have 4 more pictures of the same thing.
And again, sir, what is depicted in this? Exhibit 1.6.
See a little closer zoomed in version of the clear piece of taillight that was recovered.
As far as what the area of snow surrounding, does that sort of fit the depth at which that piece of clear plastic taillight was discovered?
Correct, sir.
The next photograph, 127. What, if anything, we're looking at in this one?
A different angle of the piece of clear taillight that was recovered.
The next photograph, exhibit 128. Sir, if you could describe to the jury what is depicted in exhibit 128.
I see a shovel. The orange thing.
Difficult to see, but there's a piece of clear taillight right here. I can see with the photo in front of me, but I'm not sure if the jurors can see it from that distance, but there is a clear piece of taillight in this location.
Next photograph, 129.
Not much better.
Again, if you could demonstrate to the jury what, if anything, of significance you observed.
Again, there's a piece of clear taillight right in this location.
Different piece of taillight than the one you were referring to previously in the prior exhibits.
Yes, sir.
Next photograph, 130.
Why didn't you just use that one?
What are we looking at in this?
Again, there's a piece of clear taillight. Again, might be difficult from the distance for the jurors, but it's in this location here.
Next photograph, 131. What, if anything, is depicted in exhibit 130?
There's a larger piece of red taillight located on the ground in this location.
And the next exhibit, 132. What, if anything, are we looking at in 132?
It's a closer photo of the same piece of taillight right here located on the ground.
The next exhibit, 133. Now, what, if anything, is depicted in 130?
There's a small piece of taillight, I believe, in this location right here.
And lastly, exhibit 134.
It's a small piece of taillight right on the ground right here in this location.
John, may I approach?
Yes.
Is that on the curb? Where the Ford Edge was parked?
Just take those phones go away and you can just take a look at those and look up anything.
What's that, sir?
Do you recognize those?
Yes, I do, sir.
What do you recognize those?
This is the mapping system we use to map evidence we recover.
Are those diagrams created pursuant to that mapping system?
Yes, they are.
What's contained in those diagrams, is that a fair and accurate portrayal of where items were recovered in relation to various markers on scene at 34 Fairview on January 29th in the afternoon?
Yeah, the marks showing on the map, they're a little offset, but that falls in the range of error with the handheld GPSs.
May I approach again, Your Honor?
Yes.
Almost to seek to introduce the next exhibits. No objection to the maps.
All right. Thank you.
Or the mouse? That's what closed captioning said. No objection to the mouse.
there's 135 and 136.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Your Honor, with the court's permission, may I publish those to one in each succession to the jury?
Yes.
Oh, come on.
Now, Lieutenant O'Hara, what you have before you is the first diagram, 135, is that what's up on the screen?
Yes, it is, sir.
And you mentioned something earlier in your testimony just now in regard to sort of items being found in close proximity, creating some overlay with the GPS system, is that correct?
Correct, sir.
And you mentioned range of error, is that correct?
Correct, sir.
You
Describe
can't
what
tell
the
me
range
they
of
can do
error
a
is
close-up.
And how that impacts sort of how it's depicted in this particular document.
So for GPS's typical range of error on a clear day is up to 16 feet. Obviously, we didn't have a clear day. We had atmospheric conditions, cloudy, snowy conditions. GPSs can be affected for their range accuracy by a few different things. One is the satellite geometry. As I said before, the GPSs connect to 4 different satellites. You also could have signal blockage. Blockage could occur from trees, buildings, bridges. Then you have atmospheric conditions, like I mentioned, and then you have the receiver end, any issues with your receiver end, which is actually the handheld GPS. Those would be the four main issues and why you may have a little offset on your GPS readings. But again, typically under clear sky conditions would be up to 16 feet.
And so using the laser pointer, if you could direct the jury's attention to what, if any, sort of significant markers or what has been marked on this particular map.
I've listed as the command post, which is where my vehicle was parked. We have the address, which is the house, 34 Fairview. Then as you move
Ooh, they have
further
pools back
south,
there.
you'll see the first red plastic that we recovered, which again was a larger piece of red plastic. They're kind of stamped on top of each other, but you'll see the sneaker, you'll see a second red piece of plastic, and you'll see the fire hydrant all marked on the map.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Kevin, if I could have the next diagram, please. Again, so what's up on the screen, is that what you have before you? Is it 136?
Yes, it is.
And again, if you could
I'm not
describe
impressed.
to the jury sort of what we're looking at in this diagram, or what, if anything, is different between 136 and 135.
We just changed the layering on the map just to make it a little easier to read. So we removed the taillight pieces, and now we just have the sneaker and the fire hydrant listed on the map here.
And that area, as far as you were talking, sort of the concentration of the search was in the area of the flagpole and the fire hydrant, is that correct?
Correct, sir. And we started closer to almost directly across from the front door. The evidence recovery all happened between the flagpole and the fire hydrant.
And if you could, or if it's possible on this diagram that you have up on the screen, could you, using the laser pointer, direct the jury's attention to sort of where the search began and where the items of evidence were located?
Search would have begun right in this area. And as we moved south, we started finding pieces of evidence right around here.
And then the area that you went, about 5 or somewhere between 5 to 10 feet, is that your testimony beyond when you started to not find any more items of evidentiary value, is that correct?
Correct. We had gone past the fire hydrant, hadn't found any other pieces of evidence for, it's probably closer to 8 to 10 feet, and that's when we suspended the search.
And so just using that laser pointer, if you could direct the jury's attention to that 8 to 10 feet, in which direction was it from the items of evidence?
Heading south towards Chapman Street, so down in this location would be where we stopped.
Thank you, sir. Your Honor, may I approach this to retrieve?
Yes.
Now, sir, at any point in time that you were on scene, were you able to look at or see any sort of photographs or any images of the damage to the taillight?
No, I was not.
So fair to say that at the time that you're conducting your search on that particular afternoon, you weren't aware of how much taillight could be there or how much you might be looking for, correct?
Correct. We did not know how much damage there was.
Now, so you talked a little bit about, well, let me ask you this. As far as from your training and experience in relation to conducting these types of searches, are you familiar with a term known as POD?
Correct. So that'd be probability of detection.
And I believe you've referenced earlier in your testimony some variables that go into that terminology. Is that correct?
Correct.
And can you describe to the jury sort of what some of those variables are and how it related to this particular search?
So probability of detection, it winds up turning into a mathematical formula to make it simpler, give us more of a baseline objective on how well we did search in the area. Covers 10 different categories. We'll rate those categories 1 through 10 on how we feel we did and kind of come up with a score to give just a baseline on what we think percentage-wise we would have found the objects we're looking for. Those categories would include the terrain, as number 1, hazards would be 2, lighting would be 3, weather would be 4, vegetation would be 5, which in this case would have been some of the grass we encountered as we got on the front lawn. As you continue on would be your spacing, which is, again, is how the team members are separated as we're searching through the area, the tactics you're using, the area size, then the team composition, and then the last one is instinct and variables. And really the last two, I think, is what works best for us. What stands out most about our team is your team composition and the instincts, just for the experience we have in searching.
So was it those variables that sort of led to the conclusion in conjunction yourself and Lieutenant Tully as far as to cease searching at that particular point after you had gone 8 to 10 feet south of the evidentiary items without locating any other evidentiary items?
Correct, sir.
I'm still not impressed.
I have no further questions of this witness.
Yay.
All right, cross-examination.
Thank you, sir.
Good morning, Lieutenant.
Morning, sir.
Sir, so you will agree with me that it was Lieutenant Brian Tully who first called you at 2:32 p.m. to ask that your team come out for an evidence search?
That's correct, sir.
And you knew at that time that Lieutenant Tully was he was in charge of the Norfolk County State Police Detectives Unit, correct?
Correct, sir.
Attached to the Norfolk County DA's office, correct?
Correct, sir.
And you also knew Trooper Michael Proctor at that time?
I knew who he is, yes, sir.
And you knew that Trooper Michael Proctor was in the same unit as Lieutenant Tully, correct?
I don't know if I knew he was assigned to that office. I'm not sure where he was assigned, sir.
You've since found out that he is.
Correct, sir.
Now, you told Lieutenant Tully during that phone call at 2:32 p.m. that you would make your team available that day, correct?
Yes, sir.
But at that point in time, Lieutenant Tully specifically held you up, right? Because he didn't have authorization yet?
Objection.
Is that true?
It's not.
Okay. He told you that he did not have the green light, correct?
He had not requested official response from sir at that time.
Okay. So you were not authorized to respond at that time, correct?
No, neither one of us are allowed to dispatch my team. We have to send up formal requests to get authorization to respond.
All right. Now, by 2:32 p.m. on January 29th, when you first spoke to Lieutenant Tully, snow had been falling consistently in Canton since the early hours, correct? The early morning hours?
I would assume so, yes, sir. It wasn't my house.
I'm sorry?
It wasn't my house, so I would assume so, yes, sir.
But you lived in Massachusetts at that
Correct,
time, right?
yes, I did, sir.
And you weren't hours away when you were contacted by Lieutenant Tully, correct?
I was not, no.
All right. Now, you were aware that John O'Keefe's body was found on Brian Albert's lawn at 6:03 that morning?
I believe when I spoke to Lieutenant Tully, he told me around 6:30.
Okay. Well, let's go with 6:30 then. So when you received the call from Lieutenant Tully, snow would have been accumulated from 6:30 a.m. approximately to approximately 2:30 p.m., correct?
Yes, sir.
And so snow had been accumulating at that point when you first got the call
8 hours.
for about 8 hours after the body was found, correct?
Correct, sir.
Now, before you conduct a search, is it important for you to know in general terms the working theory of the police and the investigators in terms of what had happened at the scene?
It's not. I want as detailed information on what we're looking for. As far as the investigation's concerned, that's not interesting to me. I'm not interested in those exact specifics. I just want to know where you would like us to search and what you need us to find.
Right, but in order to know what you are seeking to find, you'd need to learn from the investigators what they believed happened that would leave that evidence, correct?
Correct, sir. He told us we were looking for pieces of taillight from a vehicle.
All right. You'd also want to know prior to getting to the scene who had access to the scene before you got there, would you not?
I did not need to know that information, no, sir. And I did not ask that.
All right. Is it important to maintain the integrity of a crime scene before it's searched or processed?
Sometimes, but a lot of times when we're involved in searches, we might not be out for days later. If search efforts have been exhausted and they don't think any evidence can be recovered, we will go out to scenes that have been left unsecured for days on end.
Sure. No, I understand that, but that wasn't my question. My question was, is it important to maintain the integrity of a crime scene before it's searched or processed?
No, you can leave it unattended if you don't believe it'll be disturbed or anything will be taken, sir.
Is it preferable to leave a crime scene unattended prior to searching it?
No.
No, I think they would have searched it before we arrived, yes, sir.
Again, I'm going to ask if you would, please just
Oh,
respond to my
what
question.
my preference would be, sir, yes, I'd prefer that it was secured.
Okay, that wasn't very difficult.
Apologize on the
Objection, Your Honor.
So, no comments, Ms. Giannetti.
At the time that Lieutenant Tully first called you, were you aware that no one from law enforcement was controlling that crime scene?
Objection.
I'll allow it.
I was not aware of that, no, sir.
Were you aware at that time that no one had been controlling it for about 6 or 7 hours before you were called?
I was not aware of that, sir.
Were you aware that the scene had been abandoned by the police and investigators at about 7:50 in the morning?
Objection.
I'll allow it.
I was not aware of that, sir.
Were you aware that the scene was left open to the public for hours before you were asked to search?
I was not aware of that.
All right, in any case, when you got there, there was only one trooper on scene, and that was a trooper from your unit,
Correct, sir.
Beausoleil.
Correct.
Nobody else was guarding the crime scene at that point, correct?
There was not.
In fact, at that point, did you know where specifically on the property you were going to be searching?
I did not.
And in your experience, is it proper procedure in an investigation that requires a search for law enforcement to give up control of the area that will be searched?
It's not unusual for us to respond to scenes like that, sir.
It happens, but is it proper procedure, sir, to give up control of an area to be searched prior to the search?
If they don't think anything will be recovered in the meantime, sir, it's something we encounter all the time on our searches.
Right? So in this case, is it your testimony then that the investigators didn't think that anything would be recovered?
Objection.
I'll sustain the objection.
All right, well, you recorded that there was a second alert regarding this case at 2:53 p.m., correct?
That was the initial alert, sir.
Maybe we're getting into semantics here, but you were first notified at 2:32 p.m. by Lieutenant Tully, correct?
That's him calling me. The 253 alert is sent out to my full team.
Okay. That 2:53 alert is the second time that you're receiving information about this case, right? The first being 2:32 from Lieutenant Tully.
No, that's not new information. That's me taking the information I received from Lieutenant Tully and sending it out to the rest of my team. Because they were not aware of the circumstances yet.
So you were the one to send out that second alert, or that alert?
West team supervisor, because I was going to start clearing my driveway. So I reached out to a West team supervisor. He sent out that alert.
And who was that?
That was then Sergeant, now Lieutenant Simpson.
And the alert that Sergeant Simpson sent out was an instruction for members of your team to begin clearing off their cruisers and their driveways to get ready to go, correct?
That was an availability of alert to see who would be available to respond.
And that they should begin clearing off their cruisers and driveways, correct?
Yes, so they would be able to respond.
But your team was still not activated at that point, correct?
Correct.
In fact, Sergeant Simpson explicitly wrote in that alert, quote, "We do not have the green light yet," end quote, correct?
Correct, sir.
Sergeant Simpson at 2:53 p.m. in that alert actually typed it in twice that your team did not have the green light, correct?
Correct. It's a voice generator response. We'll normally duplicate the instructions, so as they listen to it, if they miss it the first time through, they can hopefully hear it clearly the second time through.
Okay. And it was very clear that you didn't have the green light from that alert, correct?
Correct, sir. We weren't authorized to respond yet.
Okay. Now, you stated that you were in Massachusetts at the time you were first contacted, correct?
Yes, sir.
And how far were you from Canton?
Normally would be about a 20-minute ride.
All right. With the blizzard conditions, however, it took you longer than that?
43 minutes, sir.
Now, you're familiar with the CERT Administrative Journal extract?
The daily journal, sir?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
That recorded, and when I say that, I mean, you called it the daily journal?
Yes, sir.
All right, I'll call it the daily journal. That daily journal recorded the initial contact that you had with Lieutenant Tully at 2:32 p.m., correct?
Yes, that was entered into the daily journal.
And then the second entry was the 2:53 p.m. alert that was sent out by Sergeant Simpson, correct?
Yeah, I'm not sure if that's in the daily journal or not, but that would be the alert, sir.
May I approach the witness, please?
Yes.
Okay, what's he getting at?
Your Honor, I'd like to hand the witness this document and leave it there. I have an extra copy. I have no problem with him referring to it. Once you've had a chance to review that, Lieutenant, if you look up at me when you're done.
All set, sir.
So you'd agree with me that the 2:32 p.m. phone call with Lieutenant Tully is in the Daily Journal, correct?
Yes, it is.
And the 2:53 p.m. alert by Sergeant Simpson is also in the journal, correct?
Yes, it is.
Both of those have a timestamp, do they not?
They do, sir.
What is the next entry on that journal?
It says, CERT activated en route to Canton.
Now, there is no time entry next to that. I'm sorry, no time is entered next to that entry, correct?
There is not, no.
The previous alert said only to clear the vehicles and driveways, essentially, right? To check on availability.
Correct, sir.
So the time that your team is alerted was entered in the journal, but there is no time entered in this journal as to when you were dispatched, correct?
Correct, sir.
But you have a memory of after that 2:53 p.m. alert sent out by Sergeant Simpson that Lieutenant Tully called you back about an hour later?
It's not a memory, sir. Our alert for the team to respond is timestamped at 3:48 p.m.
Okay, and that was Sergeant Simpson that recorded that, correct?
Correct, sir.
But that's not in the Daily Journal, correct?
No, that's in the Health and Homeland Alert Network, which records all our alerts that get sent out. And that was timestamped at 3:48.
3:48, okay. Now, other than authorization that would have been obtained after the 2:53 p.m. alert, did you ever ascertain what else changed on the part of the Norfolk State Police Detective Unit that allowed you now to have the green light?
Once I was done cleaning my driveway off, which took a significant amount of time, I spoke to my captain. He said we were approved through our chain of command. And that's when either I contacted Lieutenant Tully or he called me. He said he was approved through his chain of command to include the deputy superintendent who was authorizing a response.
Okay,
So there's several layers of the chain of command that have to approve a response for numerous reasons. Staffing reasons, they know I'm going to be pulling, again, I said some of my team members aren't full-time members. Some of them I have to pull off their assignments. So if they're on patrol, I'll now be shorting a barracks. They take that into consideration, overtime consideration, safety consideration of now additional members driving through the whether to respond. So that all gets discussed at levels above us.
All right. That answer applied to strictly issues regarding authorization on both ends, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. You recall my question, which was, other than authorization, did you learn what, if anything, had changed in that time period from 2:53 p.m. to 3:48 p.m. on the part of the Norfolk State Police Detectives Unit?
No, sir. We just talked about the authorization process.
Sometime shortly before 4 o'clock, you're talking about 3:48 being the alert authorizing you to depart. Sometime before 4, Sergeant Simpson informed your team to start heading to Canton and to report to you, correct?
Correct, sir.
That meant that team members should basically stop what they're doing, the ones who are going to be going, get their gear ready, suit up, get in a car, and start driving to Canton to meet up with you, correct?
Correct, sir.
And we've already discussed that on this particular day with blizzard conditions and the roads as they existed, that would obviously take more time than it would on a clear sunny day, correct?
Correct, sir.
And I believe your estimation is maybe about a 20-minute drive in good weather with good roads versus the 43 minutes it actually took you to get there, correct?
Correct.
Now, the 7 members of your team who did show up were Bearden, Beausoleil, Carrier, Louise, O'Brien, you, and Viscardi, correct?
Correct, sir.
You all arrived at about the same time, sir?
No, we had a pretty significant difference between arrival times.
Okay. Is there something called a personnel status report that records arrival times, sir?
No, it doesn't record arrival times. We just enter who's responding. We use our geotab, which is our vehicle locator, to determine arrival times.
Is it your testimony? Let's get back to the podium. Is it your testimony that the personnel status report does not record the date and time that somebody arrived on scene?
No, that's all manually entered, sir.
Do you deny that the personnel status report in this case recorded the date and time of each of those officers that I just mentioned who came on scene?
It has who arrived on scene, yes, sir.
But it doesn't just say who arrived on scene. The personnel status report says when they arrived on scene, correct?
Yeah, it's whenever they would have been entered into the system, but that doesn't mean they were officially on scene yet,
All
sir.
right, but again, that's not what the document says, right? It doesn't say we're entering this into the system because they're arriving. The document says on scene and it gives a date and time, does it not?
Yes, it does, sir.
All right. Now, your testimony is, oh, and by the way,
Why does he look
The-
uncomfortable?
personnel status report, you'd agree with me, has everybody except for you and Beausoleil showing up at 5 p.m. on January 29th of 2022, does it not?
Yes, it does, sir.
And it has you and Beausoleil showing up 5 minutes before that at 4:55 p.m. on January 29th, correct?
Correct.
But it's your testimony that when you got there, it was just you and Beausoleil, correct?
Correct, sir.
Which actually would be consistent with the personnel status report, right?
Yes, sir.
Because that has you two showing up first as well, right?
Yes, sir.
And then your testimony is that other members didn't show up until between 5:20 and 5:24 p.m.?
Trooper Bearden arrived at 5:21. Sergeant Luis and Sergeant O'Brien arrived at 5:24. Trooper Viscardi showed up at 5:34. Sergeant Carrier showed up at 5:41.
Okay, and so the last member of your team, which is, again, Carrier?
Carrier, correct, sir, 5:41.
He showed up at 5:41, and now your team was all there, correct?
Yes, sir.
So is it your testimony that you did not meet up as a team somewhere and head to 34 Fairview? You all arrived individually?
That's correct, sir.
Did every single trooper who arrived have their own cruiser?
Yes, they did, sir.
All right.
That's a lot of
Now,
cruising.
you would agree with me that when Lieutenant Tully first contacted you at 2:32 p.m., it was still daytime, correct?
Yes, it was.
So it was light out, correct?
Yes, sir.
You'd agree with me that at around 5 o'clock
It's getting dark.
on this late January day in Massachusetts, it was dark out by the time you got there, correct?
Yes, it was.
So when you finally arrived on scene, after getting your team getting the green light, it was dark for the start of your search, correct?
Yes, it was.
When you got there, you set up a command post.
Well, you could call my cruiser command post, sure, sir.
Well, I didn't use the term command post, sir, did I?
You did
Who
not.
used it first?
We marked my cruiser as a command post on the map, sir.
Okay, all right. And a command post is a base of operations at the scene, correct?
Yes, sir.
And you parked your cruiser basically in front of the driveway at 34 Fairview to serve as the command post?
Yes, right side of the driveway, yes, sir.
And you were initially facing away from the flagpole when you did that,
Yes, sir.
which would mean that your cruiser was parked technically on the wrong side of the street facing Cedar Crest because you were against 34 Fairview,
Correct, sir.
and then ultimately turned it around?
Well, yes, myself and Trooper Bousselet moved our vehicles.
All right, and you initially parked there in part because you wanted to keep the area where you were searching clear of vehicles, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I am pausing. I'm pausing because my doggie has come in twice asking me with pleading eyes, "Can I go outside?" Okay, I'm back. Doggie taken care of. And where am I? There we go.
And that was where you met at the, we'll call it a command post because you did, your cruiser. That was where you met to discuss the parameters of the search?
When Detective Lieutenant Tully arrived on scene, that's where we spoke.
Okay. And you would agree with me that it was Lieutenant Tully from the Norfolk State Police Detectives Unit who told you where to look and what to look for, correct?
Correct. He told us the area he thought would be the best probability to find what we were looking for.
In addition to your team, the 7 of you, you noted that there were 5 other officers on scene at various points, correct?
Yeah, I believe it was about 5, sir.
They were all in uniform?
They were not.
Some were in plain clothes?
They were.
And you didn't know who those 5 other officers were, correct?
I only recognized 2 of them, sir.
And so the other 3, you didn't know if they were state police or Canton police?
Correct, sir.
At that point, were you made aware that the Canton police had been conflicted out of this investigation?
I had not, no, sir.
All right. Now,
Surprise, surprise.
Lieutenant Tully directed you to an area where he said that John O'Keefe's body was found, correct?
He directed us to where he believed the vehicle involved had been parked and to where the victim's body was recovered.
All right, so again, in answer to my question, he did direct you to an area where he believed the victim's body was found, correct?
Yes, sir.
And he told you that he believed that the victim officer was hit and dragged by a motor vehicle, correct?
Yeah, I believe he might have said possibly dragged.
All right, but in terms of your paperwork on the case, there's something called a final mission report, correct?
Yes, there is, sir.
And what is the final mission report?
First time I've heard
That's just a
Greg.
brief summary of the actions conducted by CERT during our assignment.
And with regard to, just going back for a second, with regard to those 5 officers, you mentioned that you recognized 2 of the 5 officers that were in plainclothes at the scene.
Correct, sir.
And what departments were they from?
The only 2 I recognized were from the state police.
Okay. Now, getting back to the final mission report, you called it a brief summary of what you had done with regard to the search, correct?
Yes, sir.
Just because it's brief doesn't mean that it should be inaccurate, correct?
Correct, sir.
It's important with regard to anything that you submit on this case that you be as accurate as possible, correct?
Yes, sir.
And you try to be, correct?
Do our best, sir.
And there is an entry, well, there are 6 different categories on, or I should say 7 different categories on the final mission report. The first being the mission name, which you entered as the Canton evidence search, correct?
Yes, sir.
And that was accurate. The evidence search occurred, and it occurred in Canton, correct?
Yes, sir.
And you also put the date and time of the first call, and you entered that as January 29th of 2022 at 2:32 p.m., correct?
Yes, sir.
And that was accurate because you've testified that's when Lieutenant Tully contacted you, correct?
Yes, sir.
And there's a entry or a question or a box that says general terrain, and you entered that as neighborhood, snow-covered street, and front lawn, correct?
Correct, sir.
And that was accurate, right?
Yes, sir.
And in terms of incident type, you entered evidence search, correct?
Yes, sir.
And that was accurate, correct?
Yes, sir.
And then there's a final mission report that talks about your mission and starts with, 7 CERT members, and that's the CERT team, right?
Yes, sir.
7 CERT members responded to the scene, and it talks about, the snow in the area where the victim's body was found, the plows hadn't cleared the street, et cetera, et cetera. That paragraph is accurate as well, correct?
Yes, it is, sir.
And then there's a final mission report by, and it gives your name, Lieutenant Kevin Ohara, and it has your accurate badge number, which is 3042, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right, everything that we've just discussed in terms of what you put in your final mission report was entered accurately, correct?
Yes, sir.
And the final category is general description of mission. And would you agree with me that you entered the off-duty officer was hit and dragged by a vehicle at approximately 12:30 a.m.?
I don't remember exactly how it's worded, sir. If I could.
May I approach you on?
Yes.
It's been a recurring theme. Do you need
I do
reading
not.
glasses? You
I do
don't?
not,
Okay.
sir.
All right, I'm sorry.
Thank you, sir.
It's first I've heard of it being dragged. And is Tully one of the ones that have a question mark?
All set, sir. Thank you.
I may approach you.
Yes.
Lieutenant, having read that portion of the final mission report, is your memory refreshed?
Yes, it is, sir.
All right. And did you enter in there, the off-duty officer was hit and dragged by a vehicle at approximately 12:30 a.m.?
Yes, it is. I did, sir.
All right. Now, With regard to the area that, or I should say, Lieutenant Tully's direction to you to search the area where the victim's body was found, Lieutenant Tully never informed you that he was actually present and saw the victim's body in that spot, did he?
He did not, no, sir.
Did you mark the place where John O'Keefe's body was found with GPS coordinates?
We did not. He wasn't no longer on scene, sir, so I think that would have been not 100% accurate.
Okay. You also mentioned that Lieutenant Tully directed you to the area where the SUV had been parked, correct?
To where the vehicle was believed to have been parked, yes, sir.
At that time, did you know it was an SUV or not?
I did not, sir.
All right. But in any case, Lieutenant Tully didn't tell you that he ever saw the vehicle parked in the area to which he directed you, correct?
He did not say that he saw it there, no, sir.
So Lieutenant Tully told you to look for a man's sneaker, correct?
That was one of the items missing, yes, sir.
And he told you to look for red and clear plastic pieces of taillight, correct?
He just said taillight, didn't say red clear, but taillight pieces.
Okay. Did Lieutenant Tully give you approval not just to search outside the house, but also inside the house?
No, we never discussed searching inside the house, sir.
And you had mentioned during your testimony that you confirmed that the homeowner was there, right? Because he came out of the house at one point?
I don't know if it was the homeowner, but an adult male exited the house while we were there, sir.
Sure. And he appeared to live at that home, correct? Let me just a moment. All right. Now, with regard to the area that you were searching, you would agree with me that Lieutenant Tully was the one who directed you where to search and what to search for, correct?
Yep.
He gave us the best idea for the search area, yes, sir.
All right. And it was based on his direction that you created a grid and began your search.
He told us where he believed the vehicle was parked and where the victim's body was found, and I decided how far of a distance we would search.
Okay. So that's another way of saying it was based on his direction that you created a grid and began your search, correct?
Yeah, I based it off of the information he provided, yes, sir.
So the answer is yes.
I guess so, sir.
This was not the first time that you and your team have done a search in the snow, correct?
Not for evidence. We had never done a search like this before, just for missing person searches.
I see. But in any case, you've been trained to search winter crime scenes that have snow, correct?
Correct, sir.
There are proper techniques for conducting such searches during or after a snowfall, correct?
Yeah, we have best practices we use.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear
Yes,
you.
we have best practices we use, sir.
Of course.
They floored.
Best practices would include documenting the scene and the area to be searched with photographs and diagrams, correct?
Yes, sir.
It would also include using, gentle methods to remove snow, correct?
Yeah, the best way you can, yes, sir.
That might include, smaller hand tools, brushes, gloved hands.
Only if you would have a real small area.
It would include removing snow layer by layer and then sifting it and documenting evidence again for each layer that's removed.
Yeah, I believe that's how we went through, sir. We went slowly, methodically, and sifting through the snow as we progressed down the area. Correct.
And best practices would mean documenting by photographs along the way the progress of your search, would it not?
That would be up to the detectives or the crime scene unit, sir.
Well, but you were the one who was making those decisions, correct?
Not for documentation purposes. No, that's not our responsibility, sir.
Okay. But you would agree with me that it would be advisable to document your search in that way, would it not?
That would be at the discretion of the detective, sir.
Okay. Well, would it harm your search in any way to fully document it along the way.
It would not harm it, no, sir.
You want to take your time and work methodically and thoroughly in the search, correct?
Correct, sir.
And you want to collect evidence as it's located and immediately photograph it in place before it's disturbed, correct?
Yeah, as evidence is discovered, it will get photographed in place. Yes, sir.
During your search in this case, your team found a sneaker and pieces of red and clear plastic, correct?
Correct, sir.
The evidence that you found was basically on top of each other, within a few inches of each other, correct?
Within a foot or two, a couple feet, yes, sir.
Well, you testified at a prior proceeding in this matter, did you not?
I did, sir.
And you were sworn to tell the truth during that prior proceeding as well, correct?
Yes, sir.
And that testimony was closer in time to the search that you conducted on January 29th than today is, correct?
Yes, it was, sir.
And your memory would have been better then than it is today, correct?
Probably, sir.
You were asked the question, quote, and as far as the red and clear glass you believed consistent with the taillight, was that found in the same area as the sneaker or somewhere else? Do you recall that question?
I believe being asked that question, yes, sir.
And your answer was same area within a few inches, less than a foot, correct?
Open the
Correct,
door,
sir.
toss out the evidence, close the door, and leave in your Ford Edge.
Now, you mapped out GPS coordinates for what you found?
One of the team members did, yes, sir.
Your team did.
Yes, sir.
And Lieutenant Tully from the Norfolk State Police Detective Unit was present during the search, correct?
Yes, he was.
And he was the one that was photographing the items that were found?
Yes, he did.
So I'd like to ask you a few questions about your observations about where these items were found in relation to each other. Was there a piece of red plastic located on the roadway left of the flagpole when you look at the house from the street?
Left of the flagpole. Yes, sir.
All right. Now, given your testimony about these items essentially being in the same area, less than a foot away from each other, it could not be true then that from that red piece of plastic that was found in the street, that 3 feet south of that was a black Nike sneaker found under the snow. That couldn't have happened, correct?
Well, I don't know where the distance between the objects as far as the mapping purposes, sir, but as far as how far apart, the first thing we discovered was one red piece of plastic, and then further south, that's when we found the sneaker and additional pieces.
Right, but again, they were all in the same area, less than a foot apart,
The
correct?
same general area, but could have been over a foot, sir. I'd have to measure between the GPS markings.
Okay, well, so is your testimony today that what you testified to in that prior proceeding, where everything was less than a foot apart, that wasn't accurate?
Objection.
Is that your testimony, sir?
Best recollection that they were within around a foot, but to be 100% accurate, you would have to measure between the two GPS points, which I have not done.
Sure, but if your estimate is you didn't even say a foot, you said less than a foot, correct?
I believe that's what you read, around a foot, yes, sir.
Which is what you testified to, correct?
Correct, sir.
So if it's less than a foot, then by definition, the sneaker couldn't have been found 3 feet south of where that red piece of plastic was, correct?
Yeah, and I don't know if that's accurate, sir.
You don't know what's accurate.
Where you're saying 3 feet, I don't know if that's accurate, sir.
No, that's what I'm asking you. Is it accurate?
I don't know, sir. I'm not sure the exact distance. I didn't measure the GPS markings, sir. I'm not.
All right.
I don't know where. I didn't know where you came up with that number 3 feet, sir.
I'm just asking questions.
Okay.
I'm just asking questions. All right. So with regard to, let's assume for a moment that the sneaker was found 3 feet south of that first red piece of plastic. From your observations, was there a clear piece of plastic that was found a few feet south of that black sneaker?
There was a piece of clear plastic found just past the sneaker.
A few feet south of the sneaker?
I don't know where you're getting that from, sir.
Again, you don't have to like worry where my questions are coming
So,
from.
Mr. Yannetti, no comments. Next
Sure.
question.
I'm just asking a factual question. You were there, I was not.
Mr. Yannetti, just ask the
Yes.
question.
Oh, shut up.
Was a clear piece of plastic found a few feet south of the black sneaker, which was found 3 feet south of the red piece of plastic? Did that happen?
I don't know the distance, sir. No, not without measuring it, but I wouldn't think it was that far of a distance. They were much closer than that.
Right. I mean, you say you don't know the distance, but you testified to what the distance was in that prior proceeding, did you not?
Objection.
Next question, please.
All right. And then, moving along, we have the red piece of plastic, 3 feet south, black sneaker, a few feet south, clear plastic. Then finally, several feet south of that clear piece of plastic, was there a second piece of red plastic found? Several feet south.
No, again, I don't agree with your description of the distance, sir.
Okay. All right. So we will agree that, one piece of red plastic, 3 feet south sneaker, a few feet south clear piece of plastic, and then several feet south more red plastic. That didn't happen, correct?
I don't agree on those distances, no, sir.
No. Okay. Now, you testified that these items were buried under some snow, correct?
Correct, sir. They were under snow.
Can I have those exhibits, please? Okay, can I display exhibit 113, please?
All right, the jury needs to take a break. Why don't
Oh, sure.
why don't we have this be our morning? So take like 15.
All rise for the court, please.
Sounds more like the judge needs to take a break. So we will fast forward. And we're back.
Put it back inside.
All right, Mr. Yannetti, you can go back to the podium.
Thank you, Your Honor. Lieutenant O'Hara, you testified on direct examination that you collected 6 or 7 pieces of plastic, correct?
I believe that's what we found, yes, sir.
Would you agree with me that it's important to be precise in your investigation and your search?
Yeah, that's why Lieutenant Tully took an evidence log, sir.
So as you testify here today, 2.5 years later, can you tell the jury whether it was 6 or 7 of the pieces of plastic that you actually found?
I've never seen the evidence log from that night, sir, so I'm not sure exactly how many he recovered. Again, I was partaking in the search, so I'm not sure what the exact number is, sir.
And you would agree with me that you only mapped 3 of them on the map that was
Because others were
used
so
here at
close.
trial, correct?
Correct.
And again, that was because the pieces were essentially on top of each other, correct?
Correct. As you would mark them on the GPS, they were marking almost directly on top of each other, and we knew that was going to.
And they certainly were not being marked feet away from each other, several feet, correct?
No, sir.
All right. And you are aware that Lieutenant Tully photographed 5 pieces of plastic that day, are you not?
I'm not sure. I'd never seen the photos until probably about a week ago, sir.
All right, in any case, you did say to the State Police Detective Unit at the end of this search that if they wanted you and your team to come back out during daylight hours, you would, correct?
Correct, sir.
So I'd like to direct your attention to 6 specific dates, and then I'll ask you a question. February 3rd, February 4th, February 8th, February 10th, February 11th, and February 18th. Those 6 dates. And my question is, did the lead investigator, Trooper Michael Proctor, ever call you on one of those 6 dates to come back to the scene to conduct a further search?
No, he did not.
I have nothing further.
Okay. Redirect, Mr. Lally?
Just briefly, Your Honor.
So Lieutenant O'Hara, with respect to both yourself and Lieutenant Tully, as far as being dispatched, that decision comes from above both of your heads with respect to each of your units. Is that fair to say?
That's correct, sir.
Now, you were asked some questions about a daily journal. Can you describe for the jury sort of what that is or what kind of information would typically be kept in that?
That would just be our day-to-day activities. We'll give a quick gist of what we're doing each day. Be more general than doesn't get too thorough.
Now, you had made mention during your testimony of some other documentation that would be more specific. Is that correct?
Correct, sir.
And what would some of those be, and how would that be more specific?
That's a report that gets generated through our mission manager software, so it creates a little bit more detailed response.
And are you familiar with an AVL?
I am, yes, sir.
And what is an AVL?
It's the Geotab GPS on the cruiser's automatic vehicle locator system.
And the vehicle that you were operating that day, was that equipped with an AVL?
Yes, it was, sir.
And is that how you're able to tell the precise time of your arrival on scene,
Correct, sir.
as well as each member of your unit? Is that correct?
Correct, sir.
Now, as far as the items and where they were, again, I just asked from the photographs that were marked as exhibits before, where the items were when they were located by members of your team, they were photographed as they lay. Is that correct?
Correct, sir. As they were discovered, they were photographed.
So regardless of inches versus feet versus whatever distance it was, you didn't measure that. Is that correct?
We did not, no, sir.
But as far as where they were actually discovered or where they were recovered, they were photographed where they were when you found them, correct?
Correct, sir.
Nothing further.
All right.
All right, Lieutenant, you are all set, sir.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Need this journal back.
Thank you. Mr. Yannetti, this is your paperwork, I believe. All right, Mr. Lally, your next witness, please.
Yes, Your Honor. The Commonwealth call Ms. Maureen Hartnett to the stand.
And who will she be?
You step right up here and just watch your step for me.
You solemnly swear the evidence given to the court and jury in the case now and here to the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Yes.
I think she's going to be on stand for a long time today.
Morning, ma'am.
Good morning.
Could you please state your name and spell your last name for the jury?
Maureen Hartnett, Hartnett.
All right, Ms. Hartnett, I know I'm going to ask you throughout this to keep your voice up, okay?
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
And Ms. Hartnett, what do you do for work?
I'm a forensic scientist too with the Criminalistics Unit and Crime Scene Response Unit at the Massachusetts State Police Crime Laboratory.
And how long in total have you been with the Massachusetts State Police Crime Lab?
In total, approximately 8 years.
And I'm going to ask you some questions just a little bit about your educational background. Where did you go as far as your undergraduate was concerned?
I have a Bachelor of Science in Biology from Bridgewater State University.
And following receipt of that degree, where did you go from there?
I have a Master of Science in Forensic Science from the University of New Haven.
And after you received your master's, where did you go after that?
I was then hired by the Massachusetts State Police Crime Laboratory.
And when you're initially hired, you mentioned that you're a forensic scientist 2 now, is that correct?
Yes, correct.
So when you're initially hired, or when you were initially hired at the State Crime Lab, what was your position and what did that entail?
Are you referring to back in 2004 or in my current hire?
You're back in 2000.
In 2004, I was originally hired as a temporary employee in the CODIS unit.
And what is it that you did there?
I collected blood samples for the DNA database.
And did you receive any sort of training in regard to that work?
Yes, I was trained on how to properly collect and seal those samples.
And what did training sort of consist of in reference to that?
I demonstrated being able to take those collections and then properly store them and seal them.
Now, your current position, what is your position at the Crime Lab?
Currently, I'm a forensic scientist 2 in the criminalistics unit and crime scene response units.
And what is sort of the difference between a forensic scientist 2 versus a forensic scientist 1?
A forensic scientist 1 is still in training at the crime lab.
And did you start as a forensic scientist 1 when you came into this particular unit?
Yes, I did.
And about how long a period or process is it from the time that you start as a forensic scientist 1 before you become a forensic scientist?
It took me approximately 9 to 10 months to be signed off to be a forensic scientist 2.
And can you explain to the jury sort of what goes on as far as that process is concerned, going from a forensic scientist 1 to a forensic scientist 2?
During that time period, we are being trained in the various types of analysis that we'll perform in the criminalistics unit.
And what exactly does that training sort of consist of?
The training is broken up into modules, which addresses each type of analysis. At the end of each module, we take a written exam, an oral exam, and a hand-on practical exam. Once each module is successfully completed, we'll move on to the next module.
And
think
what are
it
your
tells
duties
us
as
so
a
nobody
forensic
can
scientist
question
in the
her.
criminalistics unit and a crime scene response?
In the criminalistics unit, I examine items of evidence submitted by law enforcement personnel or crime scene responders for the presence of biological fluids such as blood, semen, and saliva, as well as trace materials such as hairs and fibers. I also perform gunshot residue collection and damage analysis.
And with respect to the crime scene response unit?
For the crime scene response unit, I respond to crime scenes. I document crime scenes, analyze or test evidence, preserve the evidence, and then transport that evidence back to the crime lab.
And now, with reference to your training experience, specifically in the crime scene response unit, what is, based on your training experience, what is sort of the definition of what is a crime scene?
A crime scene is any location that may contain evidence related to a crime.
Duh.
Now, with regard to those 2 positions, what, if any, training did you receive in regard to those 2 units that you're currently in while you were at the lab?
I'm sorry, are you speaking about the crime scene training specifically?
Crime scene training, yes. Let me ask you first to start with the criminalistics.
The criminalistics training, I completed modules on body fluid identification, such as blood and semen, trace analysis, identification of hairs and fibers, pattern evidence, such as blood stain pattern evidence, as well as damage analysis.
And as far as the training was concerned with regard to the crime scene response?
I received training in proper documentation using sketches and diagrams of the scene. I also received training in trace collection at crime scenes, as well as gunshot residue collection at crime scenes.
Now, the crime lab that you work for, is that lab accredited?
Yes, it is.
And what does that, as far as accreditation, what does that mean?
Accreditation is a voluntary quality assurance process that the laboratory is a part of, or an outside body evaluates our crime lab to ensure that our personnel, procedures, and instruments are held to certain scientific standards.
And the outside sort of vendor or the outside accrediting agency, who is that in regard to the Massachusetts State Police Crime Lab?
Our laboratory is accredited by ANAB, which stands for ANSI National Accreditation Board, and ANSI is another acronym that stands for American National Standards Institute.
And as far as that accreditation is concerned, how often is that something that that your lab undergoes, or is there a certain audit process? How is accreditation sort of achieved?
We are audited, I believe, I want to say every 2 years, but I'm not 100% sure. They come out to the lab and they go through certain systems or have a certain scope in which they audit us. We also do internal audits as well.
And as far as that accreditation is concerned, is that something that was up to date in the month of January of 2022?
Yes, it was.
And is it up to date currently as well?
Yes.
Now, your work, I believe you just alluded to this as far as your testimony, but does your work go through some sort of review process?
Yes, every assignment that I complete goes through both a technical review process and an administrative review process.
Can you explain a little bit about what each of those is and what it means?
A technical review process is done by an independent analyst, either a peer or a supervisor, who will look through my file and determine whether or not they can come to the same conclusions that I came to based on my notes.
Are you familiar, based on your training and experience within the lab, of something called a proficiency test?
Yes, I am.
And can you explain to the jury what is your understanding? What is a proficiency test?
Proficiency tests are given in the different types of analysis that we do at the lab to ensure that we are maintaining our competency in that type of analysis.
And about how often are these administered, or how often do you take proficiency tests?
For biological fluid identification, I take 2 per year. For trace identification, I take 1 per year. And for crime scene response, I take 1 per year.
And these proficiency tests, are they required by the accrediting body ANAB that you were referring to?
Yes, they are.
And did you take a proficiency test in hair and fiber identification in 2022?
Yes, I did.
And what was the outcome of that proficiency test?
That was successfully completed and required a remediation.
Can you explain to the jury what remediation is and why this specific proficiency test required remediation?
A remediation occurs when you have an inconsistent answer with that is expected by the laboratory or by the test provider. In this particular instance, I had an inconsistent answer with the expected laboratory result.
And how was the remediation completed in this instance?
After the inconsistent answer was identified by my technical leader, we had a verbal discussion about why I came to the conclusion I did. To be more specific, each item had 2 samples. One of the samples for item 4, I determined as being a human hair without a root, when in fact the root was present. We had a discussion on how I came to that conclusion, and then she then mounted that hair back on the microscope, and we discussed different ways that I could have come to the correct conclusion.
And during that remediation process, were you permitted to continue to perform casework during that time?
Yes, I was. I was permitted to continue to perform casework in hair and fiber identification. However, I was temporarily asked to not perform technical reviews of my peers' work on hair and fiber identification.
And was prior casework that you had completed evaluated to verify that the previous reports were issued correctly?
Yes, they were.
And what was the determination in regard to that?
No previous casework was affected by this error.
And have you since completed additional proficiency tests in hair and fiber identification?
Yes, I did.
And what were the outcomes of those subsequent proficiency tests?
Those were successfully completed without needing any additional remediation.
As far as the remediation was concerned, if you could just explain to the jury sort of what the issue was and what that remediation process looked like again.
Sure. So I received 4 items in hair and fiber identification. Each item was told that they came from the same source. Item number 4 consisted of 2 items. One was a hair with a root. The other was also a human hair with a root, but I had said the root was absent. That was due to the fact that I didn't see anything like that under the microscope. It was something that was new to me. My technical leader reviewed that hair with me under the microscope. She showed me various characteristics such as a loss of scale pattern and the soft appearance of the root, which I thought was damage. Because we had this discussion and I agreed with the different characteristics that she showed me, she then gave me several hairs, both with damage and with roots, so that I could basically continue to understand the difference of what I was looking at. Once she looked at all my notes and agreed with everything that I had done, she then issued me an additional test to demonstrate my continued competency in this.
Now, how many criminalistics cases have you processed over your time at the lab?
Over 1,000.
And how many scenes have you processed in regard to your work with the crime scene response?
I responded to approximately 150 scenes, 80 of which I was the lead investigator on.
And how many exams have you completed with regard to motor vehicles?
Approximately 65.
Now, if I could ask just a general question as far as blood testing is concerned, how is it that you test for blood?
Normally, I would test for blood by locating a visible red-brown stain or an area that may contain blood. I perform a screening test, which is not specific to blood, but other items may also come up positive for screening tests. If that screening test is positive, I go on to perform a confirmatory test.
And as far as the screening test is concerned, can you explain to the jury sort of what it is that you do in performing that screening test?
The screening test is a two-step process. I take a cotton swab, which I apply sterile water to. I take that cotton swab and apply it to the area that I would like to test. And then I add my 2 chemicals to the swab. Depending on what type of screening test I perform, there'll be a color change, either blue or pink for blood.
And with regard to the confirmatory test, can you explain to the jury sort of what does that consist of?
If the screening test is positive, I'll go on to perform a confirmatory test, or again, a cotton swab is applied to the area of interest, or I may take a cutting depending on what the substance is. I then add a chemical to that cutting or swab, and then the liquid portion is added to a test card, something similar to a COVID, if you've taken a COVID test or a pregnancy test. The liquid is spotted at one end of the card and it flows up the strip. If there's 2 lines, it's positive. If there's 1 line, it's negative.
And through your training experience and work with the lab, are you familiar with a term called QLIM or QLIM?
Yes, I am.
And can you explain to the jury what QLIM means or how it's applied?
QLIM stands for quantity limited, which means that the sample, if it's being sent forward to DNA, would not be able to be divided in 2. Typically, we divide each sample going forward to DNA into 2, 1 to be tested in our DNA unit and 1 to be preserved for future testing. If an item is deemed QLIM, it means that that item, the entire item, will be used up in the DNA processing.
Now, Ms. Hartnett, if I could turn your attention to February 2nd, 2022. Do you recall that date?
Yes, I do.
And on that date, were you dispatched to the Canton Police Department?
Yes, I was.
And do you recall approximately what time of day it was that you arrived at the Canton Police Department?
I believe it was approximately 9 a.m.
And when you arrived there, who, if anyone, beyond yourself from state police or other sort of personnel was present at the Canton Police?
Trooper Proctor, Trooper Dunn, and Trooper Clark from Crime Scene Services Unit.
And at some point subsequent to that, were there other members of the state police that arrived in that area as well?
Yes.
And was one of them a reconstructionist named Trooper Paul?
I'm not sure what the name was. I do know that the reconstruction team did come on after I arrived.
Now, where within the Canton Police Department were you directed to go, or where did you go?
I was directed to the Canton Police Department garage.
And when you got to the garage, what specifically did you observe there, and what, if anything, were you asked to do?
I was asked to examine a black Lexus SUV.
And did you then examine that black Lexus SUV?
Yes, I did.
And you made certain observations of that, is that correct?
Yes, correct.
Now, with respect to your observations that you made of the black Lexus SUV, was that memorialized in any way?
Yes, I took notes as I was examining it.
And you mentioned Trooper Clark as well, is that correct?
Yes, correct.
And is he from the Crime Scene Services section within the State Police Lab?
Yes.
And what, if anything, was he doing with reference to the black Lexus while you were making your observations or while you were conducting your work?
I believe he was taking photographs. I don't know any other, I don't know what else he performed while he was there.
And you're on a may approach?
Yes.
I believe Mr. Jackson will be doing the cross. Yep, Mr. Jackson will
I'm
be.
showing you a three-page document, just ask you to look down the company. Do you recognize that document, ma'am?
Yes.
What do you recognize it to be?
It's, it looks like diagrams that I had taken at the scene. However, it appears to be missing some information.
So as far as the notes that you took, they're not memorialized. Ms. Hartnett, you had taken notes on those diagrams when you were at the Canton Police Station in the garage?
Yes, I did.
And that diagram that you have before you does not contain those notes, is that correct?
That's correct.
But as far as the diagrams that you had before you and that you were taking notes on, those are the diagrams or a form of those diagrams?
Yes, that's correct.
And contained on that is certain information related to the vehicle, is that correct?
Yes, correct.
Includes the make, the model, license plate number, is that correct?
Yes.
And if you could just read from that form as far as what you recorded as far as the make, the model, and the license plate number.
The make is a Lexus. The model is LX570. The year was 2021. The registration is Massachusetts 3GC684. The VIN number is JTJFY7AX1M434347. The exterior color is black. The interior color is tan. The registrant is Karen Reed, and the exam location was Canton PD Garage.
I approach Jan, Your Honor.
Yes.
I'm also seek to introduce in the minutes of the next exhibit.
Any objection?
No objection.
Thank you.
Why did all that have to be said out loud?
Ms. Hartnett, with reference to the diagram that you took you took notes on, do you have a copy of that with you today?
Yes, I do.
And Your Honor, with the court's permission, I would ask that the witness be allowed to take that out just to, as far as the testimony related to the diagram.
Okay.
And with the court's permission as well, I would ask if we could display what's now been marked as 137 on the screen.
Yes.
Oh, look, it's a diagram of a car.
And Ms. Hartnett, before you, I believe on that desk in front of you, there should be a laser pointer.
Yes.
Just click on the button there and point it at the screen if I or anyone asks you to do so with reference to the screen. So, Ms. Hartnett, with reference to what's up on the screen, the top of that first page of diagrams, if you could, using that laser pointer, direct the jury's attention to what you observed and what, if anything, you made note of in reference to your observations of the black Lexus on February 2nd.
In my notes, I had the vehicle was in overall good condition, and there was damage noted on the rear passenger side area. So that's not viewable in this particular diagram.
And Ms. Gilman, if you could scroll down to the bottom.
So in this area here.
And as far as the damage that you noted in the right rear passenger area, what was it specifically that you noted?
I noted there was a dent.
Yeah, don't read from there. What did you note?
There was a dent in the trunk door. There were scratches on the rear bumper, and there was a broken taillight.
And Ms. Gilman, if I could have the next page, please. Now, From the diagrams that
Oh,
are up on the
gosh,
screen
you
right
got it
now,
again.
page 2 of what's been marked as 137, if you could, using that later, point of direct your attention to each of those observations you made and where they were in relation to the document.
The damage to the dent, the rear door was in this area. The broken tail light was here. And then there were some scratches on the rear bumper as well.
Now, in addition to scratches on the rear bumper on the area of that lift gate in the back, what, if anything else, did you observe sort of within that area?
I observed an apparent hair on the rear quarter panel about here. And I also noted some pieces of glass on the rear bumper. Oh, excuse me, I want to say apparent pieces of glass.
Now, as far as that word, when you say apparent human hair on the rear bumper, why that terminology? Why do you call it that at that stage when you're in the garage and you're making these observations?
At that time, I noted that it was an apparent hair because I had not done any microscopic observation of the hair.
And subsequent to that, did you do that microscopic examination of the hair that you observed in the rear area of that Lexus SUV?
Yes, I did.
And where was that?
That was performed back at the lab.
So that item was secured by yourself, taken back to the lab, and examined microscopically.
Yes, that's correct.
Now, with reference to what you termed as the apparent glass on the rear bumper, similar to the apparent hair, why is it that you use that terminology when you're making those observations of it in the garage?
I did not have any confirmation that it was glass. We refer to it as apparent glass and preserve it for the trace unit.
And when you say reserved it for the trace unit, if you could, just in general terms, describe to the jury what the trace unit is and what is it that they do as far as their analysis in relation to what you do.
Certain items will be examined in the trace unit for identification. So the criminalistics unit does not perform glass identification. That would be done in the trace unit. They would also, they also will look at other items such as plastic and hairs, but I'm not comfortable going into the analysis that they perform. I don't have the details on that.
And lastly, Ms. Gilman, if I could have the third diagram in that. And again, Ms. Hartnett, what's up on the screen is that what you have before you as the third diagram,
Yes.
or the third page of the diagram. And what, if anything, of significance did you note in this area of that?
I noted the items that were located within the vehicle. There were some boxes on the back seat of the vehicle. There was also a package in the vehicle and some clothing and miscellaneous items in the trunk.
Now, as far as the items that were contained within the trunk, how high up were they? Let me ask you this. As far as the rear window of the trunk area, was there anything obstructing that?
I don't recall at this time.
Ms. Gilman, you can, excuse me, you can take that down. Can I approach again, Your Honor?
You're not supposed to ask questions you don't have an answer to.
I'm going to show you initially a set of 18 photographs, just asking you generally look at those, and I'm just going to ask you, generally speaking, if you recognize what is contained there.
Pictures of the SUV, including license plate. Is there a picture of the open bag of SUV cups near the base of where the missing pieces were? Because I've seen that. It's not a complete set without it. I'm really snarky today. The redundancy just, and the Botoxness just gets to me.
Hey, ma'am, do you, generally speaking, do you recognize what's depicted in those photographs?
Yes, I do.
And what do you recognize those?
These are photographs of the black Lexus SUV that I examined at the Canton Police Department.
And what's contained in those photographs, is that a fair and accurate portrayal of what you observed as far as the black Lexus on that date of February 2nd?
Yes.
May I approach?
Yes.
I'll want to see if you can speak in the minutes. Minutes.
Objection.
Your Honor, if I may, I don't mean to,
So Madam Court Reporter needs to,
I understand. So all I'm asking, Your Honor, is if I may approach just to show a couple more photographs while the court reporter is recording so that the witness may review them. Are we done?
If anyone speaks before I'm done, it won't be on the record.
Feel free to talk amongst yourselves.
It's 138 and 155.
Thank you very much. Your Honor, with the court's permission.
so Mr. Lally, you really need to keep your voice up and the witnesses.
Yes, sir.
But primarily Lally.
Your Honor, with the court's permission, may I publish those photographs that have now been marked for the jury?
Yes.
And Ms. Gilman, if I could start with 2498.
Like I said,
Ms. Hartnett, you recognize what's up on the screen?
Yes, I do.
And what do you recognize that to be?
That is a picture of the license plate of the black Lexus SUV.
And if I could have the next photograph, Ms. Gilman, 2499. Again, do you recognize what's up on the screen, Ms. Hartnett?
Yes, I do.
And what do you recognize that to be?
That is the front end of the Lexus SUV.
front end would do a lot more damage to
Next
somebody.
photograph, 2500.
That's a tank.
Again, do you recognize what's up on the screen as this exhibits 140?
Yes, I do.
And what do you recognize within this photo?
It's the exterior of the Lexus SUV.
And as far as this is inside of the garage at the Kansas Police Station, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
In addition to the vehicle, is this a fair and accurate portrayal of what the inside of the garage looked like when you were there that day on February 2nd?
Yes.
And if I could have the next
Pretty
photograph,
messy.
that's going 2501.
Oh, we're going to go from every single angle.
Again, do you recognize
Mr.
what's up on the
Bowtow's
screen,
man.
Yes, I do.
and which part of the vehicle are we looking at in this photograph?
Looks like the front passenger side of the Lexus SUV.
And the next photograph is Gilman 2502.
They knew how to
And,
pull up
you
crime
recognize
scene
what's
tape
depicted
there.
in this photograph as well.
Yes,
And which side of the vehicle are we looking at this point?
the driver's side.
And Ms. Gilman, if I could have 2505. And do you recognize what's in this photograph, Ms. Harnett?
Yes, I do.
And what do you recognize this?
That's the rear driver's side of the black Lexus SUV.
And the next photograph, Ms. Gilman, 2506. Do you recognize this as well?
Yes, I do.
And what do you recognize this?
That's the rear of the black Lexus SUV.
As far as the caution tape that's up and around the vehicle, is that something that was around the vehicle at the time that you first came into the garage?
Yes, it was.
She said, yes, it was. I'm pausing it because this corner is exactly how she backed into John O'Keefe's car when she was exiting his garage on, what time was it? On the morning of the 29th, when she's trying to figure out where's John. And they have video footage. Shows that right here on the corner. Right there.
Was.
Now, from this photograph 2506, which is exhibit 145, using the laser pointer before you, if you could draw the jury's attention to the damage that you were talking about, where you observed that located on the vehicle.
There's damage here on the bumper, and there was also damage to the rear door. I think it may be blocked by the caution tape.
And Ms. Gilman, if I could have photograph 2508. So looking now what's been marked exhibit 147, Ms. Gilman, if I could ask you to zoom in a little. Now, with reference to the damage that you were talking about that may have been blocked by the caution tape in the prior exhibit, do you see that in this exhibit?
Yes, I do.
And if you could, again, using the laser pointer, before you draw the jury's attention to where in this exhibit you observed that damage.
Right here. It's on the rear door, right underneath the window.
Now, Ms. Hartnett, as far as crime scene response is concerned, when you're doing this kind of examination of a motor vehicle, can you explain to the jury sort of what that process entails and what is it that you're doing over the course of your examination?
I complete an overall visual examination of the vehicle, noting any damage or anything that stands out that should be recorded. I then look for any stains or material that is on the vehicle, specifically any transfer that could have been left behind by a victim.
And do you determine how old any of the
As far
scratches
as
and stuff are?
Making those observations, what, if anything, do you then do with regard to those observations that you make from the visual inspection?
I'll then perform testing on any stains that I did, note or any areas of interest, and then collect anything that needs to be collected.
Now, with respect to this vehicle and this examination, what is exactly that you were requested to examine?
I was informed that this vehicle may have been involved in a hit and run, so I was requested to examine it for biological material.
And what, if any, information were you given upon arrival to the Canton Police Department in regard to that?
I was informed that the victim had scratches on his arm, as well as the fact that the car had been towed through a blizzard.
And did you perform any testing with relation to the vehicle?
Yes, I did.
And what was that testing that you performed?
I performed blood screening on the lower lying areas of the undercarriage, on each side of the tire flap, as well as the edge of the bumper and the exhaust pipe.
And what were the results of that testing that you performed there in the garage?
Those were negative.
And what, if any, evidence did you collect while you were either from the vehicle or from any other source while you were at the Canton Police Station that day?
I collected the apparent glass from the rear bumper. I collected a paint standard from the area of damage on the rear door. I also collected a paint standard from the area of damage on the rear bumper, as well as the apparent hair from the rear quarter panel. And I collected the taillight housing from the vehicle.
And turning away from that just for a moment, Ms. Gilman, if I could ask for photograph 2512. And Ms. Hartnett, direct your attention up on the screen what's been now been marked as exhibit 150. Do you recognize this?
Yes, I do.
And what, if anything, of significance in relation to items collected or items that you observed do you observe in this particular photo?
I observed the apparent glass on the rear bumper.
which stayed there even though it was being towed through
515.
areas that it didn't need to be towed through.
And again, up on the screen, what's now been marked as Exhibit 153, do you recognize this?
Yes, I do.
Now, as far as that area that you were talking about where you recovered, which you termed initially in the garage as an apparent human hair, do you see the location of that within this photograph?
Is it possible to zoom in a little bit on the area right next to the rear chair light? To the best of my recollection, it was in this area.
Now, as far as areas where you observe certain items or where damage is indicated or observed by you, is that later marked in some fashion?
I note the damage in my notes.
But as far as on the physical item itself, is that marked in any way, shape, or form?
Yes, I'll use stickers to indicate areas that I would then refer to back in my notes.
So that second set of photographs that I placed before you when the stenographer was marking those exhibits, do you generally recognize what's depicted in those photographs?
Yes.
What do you recognize those?
These are pictures of the interior of the black Lexus SUV.
May I approach, Ron?
Yes.
You're on the phone, I'll seek to introduce in a minute. These
We're not even done with these pictures. And the other ones?
Is there an objection, Mr. Jackson?
No objection to those.
One 56 and 159.
I'll take those. Thank you very much. Your Honor, with the court's permission, I would ask to publish those for the jury as well.
Okay.
Ms. Gilman, if I could have photograph 2521. Ms. Hartnett, again, direct your attention to the screen. Do you recognize what's now been marked as Exhibit 156?
Yes.
What do you recognize that to be?
That's the driver compartment of the black Lexus SUV.
And if I could have Ms. Gilman photograph 2527. Your Honor, may I have just a moment with counsel?
Okay.
It's a nice looking car.
Thank you, Your Honor. Appreciate it. So, Ms. Hartnett, direct your attention to the screen, photograph 2527, that's now been marked as Exhibit 157. Do you recognize that as well?
Yes, I do.
And what is depicted in that photograph, ma'am?
It's the front seat area of the black Lexus SUV.
And,
No, it's the
specifically, as far as
dash.
the center console area of that vehicle, is that fair and accurate portrayal of what you observed inside the vehicle on February 2nd?
Yes.
And lastly, from this packet, Ms. Gilman, if I could have photograph 2535. And Ms. Hartnett, 2535, which has now been marked as Exhibit 159, do you recognize what's up on the screen there?
Yes, I do.
And what do you recognize that to be?
That's the interior of the trunk of the black Lexus SUV.
And is that fair and accurate portrayal of the interior of the trunk as you observed it in the Canton Police Department garage on February 2nd?
Yes.
Thank you. Can I approach the witness again? Your Honor?
After Proctor had already
Yes.
fumbled through everything.
I'm showing another series of 9 photographs. Again, just ask you to look at those.
Oh,
Look up when you're finished, but really what I'm going to ask you is, do you recognize what's depicted in this?
What does the condition of the inside of the car have to do with this? Is it more Botox, more filler, more, let's make it look like I've really got a lot of stuff here? How's come, Judge, you're not telling him to get off the screen and bring up the lights?
And do you recognize what's depicted in those photographs, ma'am?
Yes, I do.
And generally speaking, what's depicted in those nine, that set of nine there?
These are pictures of the rear passenger area of the black Lexus.
Your Honor, may I approach?
Yes.
I'm open to introducing me as the next nine exhibits.
Is there any objections to Jackson?
None, Your Honor, thank you.
Well, you really have to keep your voice up.
I'm sorry?
You really have to keep your voice up.
I apologize, Your Honor.
I'd be asleep by now if I was a jury.
One 60 to 166 one. I'm sorry, 160. Me.
Thank you very much. Your Honor, with the court's permission, may I publish portions of this for the jury as well?
Okay.
Ms. Gilman, if I could have photograph 2539. Ms. Hartnett, what's up on the screen is photograph 2539. That's now been marked as exhibit 160. Do you recognize that?
Yes, I do.
And what do you recognize that to be?
That's the rear passenger area of the black Lexus.
As far as the damage that you observed from the broken taillight, if you could, using the laser pointer before you direct the jury's attention to that, or what's visible of that in this photograph.
This area here is the broken taillight.
And,
Didn't look
Ms.
that way
Gilman, if I
before.
could have the next photograph 2540. Now exhibits.
That's what it looked like.
Again, Ms. Hartnett, if you could, using that laser pointer, direct the jury's attention to where you observe, if anywhere in this photograph, damage to the right rear passenger.
There's damage in this area here to the rear tail light.
From the damage that you observed, it essentially wraps around from both the back and from the passenger side of the vehicle. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And Ms. Gilman, if I could have photograph 2554. And Ms. Hartnett, do you recognize what's up on the screen as photograph 2554, exhibit 165?
Yes, I do.
And talking before, earlier in your testimony, about some stickers or some sort of evidentiary marker that you would put on an item that you're examining, correct?
Correct.
And do you see any of that in this photograph here?
Yes, I do.
And could you direct the jury's attention using laser pointer to where you observe that and what, if any area of damage or what that's denoted?
There's a sticker here, and I know you can't see it. I don't know if you can zoom in. There's a letter on the sticker, I believe it's A, that denotes that there's something there that I was going to collect. And right next to that sticker here is the apparent hair that I noticed.
Thought you said it was
Ms. Gilman, if I
off
could
to the
have
right of the light.
2558. My fault. 2556. And similarly, Ms. Hartnett, do you recognize anything in this photograph in regard to something that you had marked?
Yes, that's the rear bumper of the SUV.
And Ms. Gilman, if you could zoom in a little on that placard. And Ms. Hartnett, in this photograph, what, if anything, is depicted that you denoted something sort of black or further examine at a later?
There's pieces of apparent glass here on the bumper.
When a car gets towed, doesn't it get towed up right?
May I approach the witness again, Your Honor?
Yes.
All that bouncing stuff around, and you still have pieces of glass just sitting there? That seems weird to me.
I'm showing you another series of 4 photographs. If you could just those up on your list.
Oh, God. How many angles of the same thing are we going to see now?
Do you recognize what's depicted in those photographs, ma'am?
Yes, I do.
And what do you recognize those to be?
This is the rear passenger exterior right below the tail light on the Lexus SUV.
And Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
Yes.
Come up, please, introduce you as the next exhibit. No objection.
I can't wait for the defense's turn to present everything. We'll have this wrapped up in no time. Because they're not Botoxing it.
169 to 173.
Your Honor, with the court's permission, may I publish some of these photographs to the jury?
Yes.
Ms. Gilman, if I could have photograph 2573.
How come they're already in there?
Ms. Sergeant, again, photograph 2573, what's now marked as exhibit 169, and recognize what's depicted in this.
Yes, I do.
And if you could explain to the jury sort of what we're looking at in this photograph.
This is the area of the rear passenger side of the vehicle just below the tail light.
And Ms. Gilman, if I get past sort of towards the top center of that photograph, if you could zoom in on that area. Ms. Hartnett, do you observe another sort of sticker or placard that you placed in that area?
Yes, I do.
And what, if anything, is that in reference to?
I'm sorry, I can't see what the letter is on it, so I'm not sure what that's in reference to.
If I could ask Ms. Gilman.
So, Mr. Lally, when you put your head down to read, your voice goes down considerably. We can't get a recording of your voice, so you need to speak up.
Understood.
Yeah.
Ms. Gilman, if I could have photograph 2576.
See, it's all in there.
And Ms. Gilman, if you could, with reference to the two areas up on that, if you could zoom in that
The
area.
top one is A.
All right, first on the one below. Ms. Hartnett, can you see better there as far as what the sticker is and what you had noted there?
Yes.
And can you explain to the jury what you had noted in that particular area?
I noted there were scratches in that area.
And Ms. Gilman, if you could, the one above. Thank you. Also within this exhibit 172, there's another sticker further upward on the vehicle. What, if anything, did you note or observe in that particular area?
In that area, I noted the apparent hair.
Thank you. May I approach the witness again, Your Honor?
Yes.
I thought the hair was to the right of the tail light assembly.
Another series of photographs of this asking the same question. If you could take a look at those and asking if you recognize apparently what they are.
He's Botoxing it. filling it up. Make it look like he's got something.
Next question, Mr. Lally.
This could have been so streamlined.
May I approach?
Yes.
Call, please introduce the witness, next exhibits.
No objection.
Jeez. Could have been so streamlined.
Thank you very much.
Your Honor, with the court's permission, I'd ask to publish some of those photographs for the jury as well.
Yes.
Ms. Gilman, if I could have 2558.
No signal. Check the external something or other. That's not my signal, is it? Okay.
Again, Ms. Hartnett, do you recognize what's contained in photograph 2558, exhibit 173?
Yes, I do.
And Ms. Gilman, if I could ask you to just zoom in a bit on the sticker in the middle of the screen. And again, Ms. Hartnett, what is depicted in this photograph?
That is a picture of the apparent hair I noted in the area.
Ms. Gilman, if I could have 2561. For the record, this is exhibit 176. Ms. Gilman, if I could ask you to zoom in a bit on the sticker in the middle there. Hartnett, do you recognize what's depicted in this exhibit?
Yes, I do.
What do you recognize that to be?
That's the damage I noted on the rear door.
Thank you. Your Honor, may I approach
Yes.
the witness?
Ah, jeez.
I'm showing you a series of 3 photographs. Yes, those are only finished. And do you recognize those, ma'am?
Yes, I do.
And what do you recognize those to be?
These are photos that I took of the taillight housing back at the lab.
And what's contained in that, those 3 photographs, is that a fair and accurate portrayal of the taillight housing once you had removed it and taken it back to the lab?
Yes.
May I approach again, Your Honor?
Yes.
Almost introduce the minutes next.
No objection.
Thank you.
They had to get somebody special in order to remove that. Was she removing it or did somebody else remove it for her? Question.
187 to 139.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And so, Ms. Hartnett, before we get to those photographs, I do have a few questions. So it makes no difference to me, but I think we can turn the light back. Thank you.
Normally the judge is right there if it's something the defense is showing.
Now, as far as the collection of that evidence that you collected from the vehicle specifically, how was that evidence collected? And again, you've received training in regard to collecting evidence, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And the collection of evidence that you did in this case, was that in conformity with that training and experience that you have?
Yes, it was.
And so how did you collect those pieces of evidence from the vehicle on that particular?
It depends on what the item was, the taillight specifically, if that is that what you're asking about?
Well, first, let me ask as far as the hair, and then I'll move on to some other items if that's all right. So as far as the hair was concerned, how was that collected?
I would have collected the hair with tweezers, put it in a glassine envelope, and then put that into a larger manila envelope.
And as far as those steps that you take, as far as the collection is concerned, what are some of the concerns for that, or why is it that you take those steps?
Prior to touching any evidence, I would put on gloves. I'm not sure in this case whether I used disposable tweezers or reusable tweezers. If I used reusable tweezers, they would have been bleached prior to my using them to prevent contamination.
And so each of those sort of steps that you take in your collection process, is that fair to say that it's in an effort to combat contamination?
Yes, that's correct.
Now, with regard to the paint chips or the paint standards from the vehicle, how did you collect those?
Those would have been collected with a disposable scalpel. I use it to scrape off pieces of paint from the vehicle, which are then put in a glassine envelope and a larger manila envelope.
And as far as the pieces of glass from the bumper area of the vehicle, how were those collected?
I collected those with gloves. I may have used tweezers. I don't recall at the time. But again, if I used tweezers, I would have used bleach tweezers or disposable tweezers.
Now, as far as that taillight assembly was concerned, how was that collected, or what, if any, issues did you have with regard to collecting?
I removed the taillight. Once I had the taillight housing in my possession, I did have trouble disconnecting it from the vehicle. So a police officer on scene did help me disconnect it from the vehicle so that I could properly package it.
And as far as what exactly was it that officer helped you do, or what, if anything, did he do?
I believe he just removed, helped undo the wires that were in the back of the taillight so that I could properly hold it and didn't have to place it down anywhere.
So you had two hands on the taillight as he was performing that, is that
thought they
correct?
needed
Yes, I believe I did.
Tool.
And as far as the area of the taillight that you were holding, you were wearing gloves, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And as far as that area that you were holding with your two gloved hands, did that officer touch any area of that part of the taillight?
Not to my recollection, no.
And do you recall whether or not that officer was wearing gloves himself when he disconnected that wiring?
I don't recall.
Now, as far as once you removed that taillight from there, what, if anything, did you do with the taillight there?
I put it into a brown paper bag and then transported it back to the lab, where I then properly secured it in a box with added cushion from additional paper to ensure that no additional damage was done.
Now, with respect to your time at the Canton Police Station, were you presented with any additional evidence by any officers from the Canton Police?
Yes, I was.
And what were those items?
I was presented with a broken drinking glass that was reported to have been recovered from the scene at 34 Fairview Road. I was also presented with several solo cups filled with frozen red-brown stains.
Now, starting with the drinking glass, what, if anything, did you do with regard to the drinking glass?
I packaged it in a brown paper bag.
And with regard to the cups with red-brown stains contained within, what, if anything, did you do with regard to that?
I allowed the cups to thaw, and then I took 2 sterile swabs, like something similar to a Q-tip, and collected a sample from the red-brown stains in those cups.
And then what, if anything, after you took the swabbings from those
6
solo
cups, only 2 swabs?
Let me ask first with regard to the solo cups, what were
In a
those?
minute, baby.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Sure. So after you took the swabbings from the red cups, what, if anything, was done with the red cups?
I returned those to the Canton Police Department to store as they saw fit.
And as far as the swabbings that you took, what did you do with those?
I secured those in a glassine envelope and a larger envelope, and then transported those back to the lab.
Now, after your examination on scene, you returned back to the lab, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And what items of evidence did you examine first in this case in the laboratory?
I examined the apparent hair from the vehicle as well as the broken taillight.
Now, starting with the examination of the taillight, well, let me ask, in general terms, when items are taken by you back from any kind of scene or any kind of place that you're processing, and you bring them back to the lab, what is it that you do with them when you get back to the lab?
We will find out what she does with them when she gets back to the lab. After a short potty break. So, little miss needs to go outside. Okay. My little four-legged was taken care of. So we can go back to,
When I get back to the lab, I ensure that they're packaged properly, that they're sealed, and they're stored in the appropriate location within the lab. I also enter them into our laboratory information management system so that from that point forward, those items can be tracked throughout the lab.
Now, each of those, now when you come in with sort of a case, is there some sort of number or something that's associated with the case when you first sort of generate that?
Yes.
And do you recall the case number that you assigned or was assigned with regard to this investigation?
Yes, I do.
And what is that case number?
The case number at the lab was 22-2184.
Now, with regard to each specific item of evidence that's taken back to the lab and logged in, what, if any, numbers are assigned or associated with those particular pieces of evidence?
Each piece of evidence is given an independent lab item number.
Now, with respect to the taillight, that was labeled as 3-1, is that correct?
That's correct.
So with respect to item 3-1 or the taillight, can you explain to the jury the examination process that went into that?
Sure. I prepped my workspace by spraying it down with a 10% bleach solution. I also sprayed down any reusable utensils that I would need to use. I then applied a piece of butcher paper to protect the lab bench and prevent contamination. I would put on gloves, my lab coat, and mask before I examine any item of evidence. And then I took photographs of what the packaging looked like and then photograph of the piece of evidence itself.
And then from that specific item, did you perform any testing on that item?
No, I did not do any testing on the item.
And why not?
I was, due to the case history, there was no visible red-brown stains on the item, as well as the fact there was a very limited surface area for me to sample from. In addition, I was informed that the car had been towed through a blizzard. So given the fact that there was potentially very limited material on the taillight, if any type of testing that we do would remove additional material. So I made the conservative decision to take a swabbing of the item and send it forward for DNA.
And as far as that swabbing of the item for DNA purposes, can you explain sort of what the process is or how that's done?
Yes, we use a polyester swab, which is a flat spatula-shaped swab. I apply sterile water to the swab and rub the exposed areas of the taillight. And then that swab dries before it's packaged and sent to DNA.
and that's where they hit the pig.
You know, with the court's permission, could I publish for the jury what's now been marked as exhibits 187 through 189?
Yes.
And Ms. Gilman, if I could have first photograph 8970. Now, Ms. Hartnett, directing your attention to what's up on the screen now is exhibit 187. Again, do you recognize what's depicted in there?
Yes, I do.
Taillight housing.
That is the taillight that I removed from the black Lexus SUV.
And Ms. Gilman, if I could have 8971. Next
The
photograph.
housing is what the light goes into, so my
Now
mistake.
on the screen is exhibit 188. Again, do you recognize what's depicted there?
Yes, I do.
And what is depicted there, and what, if anything, is, in addition to the taillight, what, if anything, are you?
That is the taillight from the black Lexus SUV from a different angle. I'm holding up a ruler to show the scale of the item.
And lastly, photograph 8972 to 189. And again, do you recognize what's up on the screen?
Yes, I do.
Can you explain to the jury what we're looking at, perspective-wise, and what, if anything, you're doing in this book?
That is the back side of the taillight. And again, I'm holding up a ruler to show the scale of the item.
Okay. Ms. Gilman, you can take that time. Sorry, just one moment, Sharon.
Is it 12:23 their time? She'll be breaking for lunch and
Now, Ms. Hartnett, from your initial response to the Canton Police Department, you secured a number of different items from the Canton Police Station that day, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And those were labeled subsequently as items 3-1 through 3-13, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Now, turning your attention to item 3-6, that was the apparent hair, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And in reference to your analysis with regard to hair, that QLIM term that I asked you about before, QLIM, what, if any, significance did that terminology have to your examination of the hair?
Per protocol, all hairs that will go forward for DNA are considered QLIM, meaning that the entire sample will be used up during testing.
And with regard to item 3-6, the apparent hair, can you explain the examination process or what it is that you're doing with reference to that piece?
Yes. I take the apparent hair and I mount it on a glass slide using deionized water. I then put the slide under a microscope and I'm looking for certain characteristics to determine if that piece of material is a hair or fiber or some other unknown material.
And as far as your examination is concerned in that microscopic analysis, what are some of the things or what are some of the characteristics that you're trained to look for that you observed in this specific instance to give you that determination that it was a human?
On the exterior of the hair, there'll be scales, and depending on the shape, it can help you determine whether or not the hair is an animal hair or a human hair. Human hair have imbricate scales, which look like overlapping shingles with a wave-like edge. That is what I observed on this hair. In addition, the internal characteristics of the item are looked at. Running through the center of a hair is a medulla, which is a channel. Animal medullas and human medullas look different in that human medullas will have an amorphous shape, which means they don't really have any shape at all, whereas an animal medulla will have distinctive or can have distinctive patterns within them. Also, the size of that medulla or channel that runs through the center of a hair in a human hair is approximately 1/3 the entire width of the hair, or in animals, it may be much larger than that.
Now, as far as based on your examination of this particular item, this hair, what, if any, opinion or what, if any, determination did you come to in regard to that item that you examined microscopically here?
I determined the hair was consistent with the human hair with a root.
Now, as far as that item was concerned, was there any measurements that were done in reference to that?
Yes, there were.
And do you recall what the measurements were or what the length was?
I'd have to refer to my notes if that's
Sorry,
possible.
may the witness refer to her notes just to reference
Yes.
The hair was approximately 7/8 inches long.
Now, with regard to item 3-6, the hair, did you perform any testing on that?
No, I did not perform any testing.
And why not?
The only type of analysis done on hairs in the criminalistics unit is a visual microscopic examination.
So where did the hair go from there?
At that point, I cut the hair into two pieces, one end that contains the root and then the remaining end of the shaft. The root end went to our internal DNA unit.
Now, it may be pretty well understood, but when you say root end versus shaft end, can you explain to the jury what you mean by those sort of
Yeah, because
descriptions?
they're dumb.
The root end is the end that would have been attached to the scalp, and the shaft end is just the remaining outer portion of the hair.
And how is it that you're able to determine sort of the difference between the root end and the shaft end?
Through the microscopic characteristics under the that I viewed.
Now, with reference to that item 3-6, the hair, were any decisions made in regard to what testing could or would be performed on those samples?
Yes, based on the criminalistics protocol, the root end of the hair would be tested internally in our DNA unit, and if potential testing needed to be done on the shaft end, that would be sent out to an external lab.
And do you know why that is?
We don't perform that type of DNA testing at our lab.
And that's something, you're familiar with the term mitochondrial DNA testing?
I am familiar with it, but I don't really have a full understanding of it.
But as far as your understanding is the type of testing that would have had to been sort of sent out to an external vendor, that would be, the type was mitochondrial?
Yes, that was my knowledge at the time, yes.
Now, at some point, did you have a conversation with regard to examination of the remaining items in this case sometime in May of 23?
Yes.
And what was discussed?
It was discussed that I would examine the clothing and some of the other items for biological
May?
testing.
And
3
specifically,
months
there was
later?
item 7-18, which was a gray sweatshirt attributed to Mr. John O'Keefe, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Now, from that, as far as sort of an additional analysis or an examination of those clothing items, what is it that you were doing and what is it that you were looking for in regard to your examination of the clothing?
I examined the item for biologicals. In this case, I was looking to determine if there was any blood present on the item. I also did damage analysis of various areas on the sleeve and the front and back of the item. I also took a trace collection from the item and additional DNA samples for that, additional skin cell collection samples from the item.
3
Now,
months later.
Starting first with, as far as that specific item, 7-18, the gray sweatshirt, what, if any, observations in general did you make when you examined it?
There were red, brown, and brown stains on the item. There was damage from the top of the shirt to the bottom of the shirt, as well as across each sleeve of the shirt. I also noted additional damage on the right sleeve.
Now, each of the areas of damage that you observed, similar to what we saw with the vehicle, were those areas marked as well?
Yes, I marked each of those areas that I was going to do further analysis on with a number.
And there were essentially 13 different areas on that sweatshirt that you had marked, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
Yes.
3 months later. And if I'm not mistaken, Proctor's the one that had it all that time. Yeah, nothing fishy going on here.
Sorry, I'm just showing you a series of 6 photographs, and again, asking you to look at those and look up when you finish. And do you recognize those photographs?
Yes, I do.
And what do you recognize those to be?
These are the photographs I took of item 7-18, the long sleeve gray shirt.
And those are sort of the preliminary or overall photographs, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Your Honor, may I approach?
Yes.
I'm on the seat to introduce and admit as the next exhibits.
No objection.
Thank you.
Three months later. February, March, April, May. I think she said May. I counted off 3. Yeah.
It was 190 to 195.
Thank you very much. Ms. Hartnett, before I turn to these, I just had one follow-up question. And you had been talking about, or testifying about, sort of the difference between the root end and the shaft end of the hair. You had mentioned that the root end is typically something that would be attached to the scalp. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
So that would be in reference to a hair that comes from someone's head, correct?
Yeah, but not necessarily. We don't perform body origin identification.
And so to that point, as far as the root end of the hair that was attached to the body at some point, whether it's the head, an arm, a leg, you don't know where.
Correct, I do not.
Siren.
Your Honor, with the court's permission, I would ask to publish some of these photographs for the jury as well.
Okay.
Ms. Gilman, if I could have, excuse me, photograph 9789. Ms. Hartnett, putting up on the screen now what's been marked as Exhibit 190. Do you recognize that?
Yes, I do.
And what do you recognize that to be?
That is the photograph I took of item 7-18. It is the exterior front.
Now remember,
Ms. Gilman, if I could have 9792.
chest compressions and
next photograph.
CPR was done on him.
What's
Their
up on the
hands
screen is
covered in
exhibit
blood.
191. You recognize that as well, Ms. Hartnett?
Yes, I do.
What do you recognize that to be?
That is the exterior rear of item 7-18.
And if I could have the next photograph, Ms. Gilman, 9791. Again, do you recognize what's up on the screen now is exhibit 192?
Yes, I do.
Can you explain to the jury what that is?
That is the interior front of item 7-18.
And lastly, not lastly, for this purpose, photograph 9792. And again, do you recognize what's up on the screen is exhibit 193?
Yes, I do.
What do you recognize that to be?
That's the interior back of item 7-18.
And Ms. Gilman, if I could have 9795. Again, Ms. Hartnett, do you recognize what's up on the screen as exhibit 194?
Yes, I do.
What do you recognize that to be?
That is the exterior front of item 7-18, and it also contains markers that I placed on the item to note areas of damage.
And the next photograph would be Ms. Gilman 9796. If you could zoom in on that one. Now, Ms. Hartnett, what we're looking at here, that's the right sleeve of the gray sweatshirt of item 7-18, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And so, starting with some of the 13 different areas that you labeled, this starts with 1, 2, 3, 4, and goes up to 9, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you, ma'am. I approach the witness again, Your Honor.
Yes.
Hartnett showing you another series of photographs. Just ask if you could review those, look up when you're finished. Ms. Hartnett, do you recognize what's depicted in those photographs?
Yes, I do.
And what do you recognize those to be?
These are close-up photos of the areas of damage 1 through 5.
May I approach, Your Honor?
Yes.
Come on, to introduce and admit as the next exhibits.
No objection, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Before we begin, Madam Court Reporter, Your Honor, if I may approach just to show the next series of photographs.
Okay.
All of this could have been done before court started today. By saying, Your Honor, we're going to be submitting these. There's no objection from the defense. Can we go ahead and get them labeled and entered? That could have been done before this started. If I understand stuff correctly, like I did with Deputy Heard. They did a lot of stuff before the jury came out.
It's 196 through 205.
Thank you.
Your Honor, with the court's permission, if I could publish some of those photographs for the jury as well.
Yes.
Ms. Gilman, if I could have photograph 9811.
Looks like a tooth through there.
With respect to what's up on the screen, Ms. Hartnett, you recognize what's now been marked as Exhibit 196.
Yes,
What do you recognize that to be?
that is an area of damage that I noted as area 1 in my notes.
It's Ms. Gilman, if I could have, photograph 9812, the next one. Again, Ms. Hartnett, do you recognize what's up on the screen as Exhibit 197?
Yes, I do.
And with respect to this, what are you doing here?
No brown liquid.
That is a close-up photo of the same area of damage, area 1.
That has some measurement that you're taking with reference to the size of that damage, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And did you do that respectively with each of the respective areas that you noted on each of the garments that you examined?
Yes, I did.
How's come? How's come no brown
If I could
stain?
have photograph 9813. Again, this is area 2, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Ms. Gilman, if I could have photograph 9815. Again, what's up on the screen is Exhibit 200. Recognize this as what now?
That's a photograph of the area 3 that I noted.
Is that the exterior or interior?
If I could have 9817.
The interior would have the blood, direct contact.
Now, with respect to what's now been marked as Exhibit 202, do you recognize that as well?
Yes, I do.
And is that the number 4 area that you noted on the right arm sleeve of the gray sweatshirt, Mr. O'Keefe?
Yes, that's correct.
And Ms. Gilman, if I could have photograph 9819. What's up on the screen is Exhibit 204. Do you recognize that as well?
Yes, I do.
And again, what is depicted in Exhibit 204?
That's the area of damage number 5 that I had in my notes.
I approach again, Your Honor.
Yes.
I see 2 damaged areas that don't have a card next to it.
The photographs that I placed before you while the stenographer was marking the prior exhibits, do you recognize what's depicted in those?
Yes, I do.
And can you describe for the jury, sort of generally speaking, what's depicted in those, ma'am?
These are close-up photos of areas 6 through 11 that I noted on the long sleeve gray shirt.
And may I approach this retrieve, Your Honor?
Yes.
Your Honor, I'll seek to introduce as the next exhibits.
No objection.
And if I may approach the witness just to present another set.
Okay.
She's been hanging around with big fish in a little pond. Now she's sitting next to all right, big fish in a little pond. These are little fish in a big pond who can hold their own weight. It's a higher caliber, no matter how you look at it.
Exhibits 206 through 217.
Thank you.
So, Ms. Hartnett, what's contained in these photographs now been marked as exhibits 206 through 217. Those essentially sort of the same close-ups and then a close-up with a measurement that the jury just saw in regard to what you had marked as 1 through 5.
Yes, that's correct.
And this is just 6 through 11 on that same area in the right sleeve of Mr. O'Keefe's sweatshirt.
Yes, that's correct.
Now, with regard to the photos that I just placed before you a moment before, do you recognize what's depicted in those?
Yes, I do.
And what do you recognize those to be?
These are the areas of damage 12 and 13 on the rear of the sweatshirt.
Your Honor, may I approach?
Yes.
Come up and introduce the minutes.
No objection.
218 through 221.
Your Honor, with the court's permission, may I publish these photographs for the jury?
Yes.
Ms. Gilman, if I could have photograph 9837. And Ms. Hartnett, do you recognize what's up on the screen as Exhibit 218?
Yes, I do.
Do you recognize that to be?
That's the exterior back of the gray sweatshirt.
And
Defensive,
the items marked are the
that would be right in line with that.
13, are they depicted on that?
Yes, they are.
If you could, using a laser pointer, just draw the jury's attention to where 12 and 13 are.
Is it possible to zoom in on the numbers? I can't read them from here. So there's area 2 and area 12 and area 13.
And Ms. Gilman, if I could have photograph 9838.
And which one's the big rip? It looks like a rip.
Exhibit 219 up on the screen. Is that just a closer image of those areas you marked as 12 and 13? Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you. Now, with respect to the other photographs that I had placed before you when the stenographer was marking those, do you recognize in general terms what's depicted in those?
Yes, I do.
And what do you recognize those to be?
These are additional pictures of the sweatshirt in which I've also made some notations of areas that need further testing.
May I approach, Your Honor?
Yes.
Call them off the seat. Introduce and admit as the next exhibit.
No objection, Your Honor.
If I may, Your Honor, just place these before the witness.
It's 222 through 230.
Thank you very much. Now, Ms. Harden, before I get to what's now been marked as Exhibit 222 through 230, if I could just ask you a couple questions in regard to damage that you noted on this item or really any item. What is the process that you would go through as far as classifying damage to a clothing item?
I look at the macroscopic characteristics of the area of damage, and then I also examine the area of damage underneath the microscope.
And so what would lead you to make that sort of classification as far as something is damaged?
I look at the overall shape. I also look at the fiber ends. For instance, a tear will have rough fiber ends and possibly separation of the weave of the fabric, or a cut, you have even ends without any fraying.
Now, are you able to tell from your examination of those fibers and of those clothing materials sort of what caused those tears and cuts?
No.
Now, are you familiar through your training experience with something called an ALS or an alternate light source?
Yes.
And can you explain to the jury what your understanding of that term is and what, if any, use it had to you in this case?
An alternate light source is a light that uses a different wavelength that enables visualization of some biological fluids that can't be seen necessarily with the naked eye. On this particular shirt, I did use the alternate light source.
And what, if anything, did you observe when you used it?
I used that light source around those areas of damage to determine if there was any biological fluids that were fluorescing. The ALS did not show any stains in that area.
Now, with regard to what you had labeled as sort of
He had all
tears
these
or cuts
cuts and
1
stuff,
through
but no
9
blood,
that
huh?
you noted. Did you do any additional testing or collecting specifically from those areas?
I collected 2 cotton swabs moistened with sterile water around those areas of damage.
And why did you do
It was told to me that potentially the victim may have been bitten by a dog during an incident. So I was taking swabs of that area to be sent out to determine if there's any dog DNA on that area.
Now, is that kind of testing, as far as canine testing or animal testing, is that something that your lab at the State Police Crime Lab is accredited or authorized to do?
No, we do not do that type of testing.
And is that sort of sent out to an external vendor then?
Yes, that's correct.
And is that something that you had done on any prior cases or any previous situations where you had collected items and sent it out to a specific lab for animal testing?
I did consult once with an external lab on taking those types of collections, but this is the first time I've collected and actually sent something out for that type of testing.
And specifically in this type of testing and in this case, what lab were those items sent out to?
We use the UC Davis Veterinary Lab in California.
And as far as prior to collecting or prepping or doing anything as far as collecting samples from that, who, if anyone, did you talk to, or what, if any, direction did you receive in regard to collecting those samples?
I'll allow it.
I emailed Terry Kuhn, who is one of the analysts at the clinic, who aided me in how best to collect the sample for their lab.
And what you were directed to do as far as collection, packaging, and shipping, was that at the direction of the UC Davis lab?
Yes, that's correct.
And you performed those functions in conformity with what Ms. Kuhn told you, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Now, with regard to those items, did you note, with regard to the clothing items, as far as the gray sweatshirt was concerned, did you note any stains on those areas, on that clothing item?
Yes, I did note stains in those areas.
And then what, if any, testing was done on those stains that you observed?
Can you be more specific what stains you're referring to?
So what I'm specifically referring to is the items on the gray sweatshirt, item 7-18, as far as any stains that you observed on there. Again, sort of moving on from what you had collected for the UC Davis lab, but in other areas of that item. Well, let me actually first turning back to that. So the item that we were talking about as far as where you collected stains from that were sent off to the UC Davis lab, which item were they collected from and where on that item were they collected?
I collected 2 swabs from the areas around the damaged areas on the right sleeve. I wasn't necessarily taking them from any stains. I did use the ALS to determine if there were any stains there, which I did not visualize. So I was doing that for potential saliva collection from that area.
And thank you for the clarity. I think that was me confusing as far as the questions. So turning away from that area as far as the collection for the UC Davis lab, in addition to that, what, if any, stains did you observe on that article of clothing 718, the gray sweatshirt?
I also observed numerous red-brown stains on that item of clothing.
And so with regard to those red-brown stains, what, if any, testing was done on those stains?
On each of those stains, I performed a blood screening test as well as a blood confirmatory test.
And are those the same sort of initial testing screening test you were talking about before, and then the confirmatory test?
Yes, that's correct. A different screening test was used in the lab than was used at the scene due to a protocol change, but essentially it's the same mechanism.
And was that with respect just to the gray sweatshirt, or were there other items of clothing of Mr. O'Keefe's that you tested with the screening test in the lab and a confirmatory test in the lab?
I examined other items of clothing as well.
Now, if I could bring your attention back to what's now been marked as exhibits 222 through 230. Your Honor, with the court's permission, if I could publish some of those photographs for the jury.
Okay.
And Ms. Gilman, if I could first have photograph 9841. And what's been marked as exhibit 222. Again, you recognize what's depicted up on the screen?
Yes, I do.
And with reference to your observations of the red-brown stains on that clothing or any other item of clothing, similar to the tears or cuts or the damaged areas that you observed, were those areas similarly marked with some sort of sticker?
Yes, that's correct.
And is it sort of the same linear path as far as numbering, or is it lettering, or how do you denote those?
For the red brown stains on this item, I use letters.
Starting with A and then sort of going through it, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And Ms. Gilman, if I could have, excuse me, photograph 9842. Again, do you recognize what's up on the screen?
Yes, I do.
And what do you recognize that to be?
That would be red brown stain A that I noted on the sweatshirt.
And Ms. Gilman, if I could have 9843. And what's up on the screen, which has been marked as exhibit 224, do you recognize that as well?
Yes, I do.
And what do you recognize that to be?
Those are red brown stains B and C that I noted on the sweatshirt.
And Ms. Gilman, if I could have photograph 9844. What's up on the screen now is exhibit 225. Those are stains that you labeled B, C, and F, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
That's just sort of a pulled out version of that to denote where B and C were located on the sweatshirt. Is that fair to say?
Yes, that's correct.
And Ms. Gilman, if I could have photograph 9846. And what's now up on the screen is exhibit 227. And again, Ms. Gilman, if you could zoom in a little bit on the stickers. And Ms. Hartnett, do you recognize what's up there on the screen as exhibit 227?
Yes, I do.
And these are two other stains that you noted as far as D and E on the same item.
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you. Now, ma'am, with reference to the other photographs that I think you still have before you that I gave you when the stenographer was marking the last batch, do you recognize generally what's depicted in those photographs?
Yes, I do.
And what do you recognize those to be?
These are photographs of item 7-17, the orange T-shirt that was told was belonging to John O'Keefe.
And what's depicted in those photographs, is that a fair and accurate portrayal of what you observed as far as the orange T-shirt was concerned in your lab that day?
Yes, that's correct.
May I approach again, Your Honor?
Yes.
I'm welcome to seek to introduce the exhibits. The next exhibits.
No objection, Your Honor.
Thank you.
I can read this.
Didn't know there was an orange T-shirt underneath. But still, the guy must have run hot. Excuse me. I've got two sons that run hot. No winter that can be running around in shorts and a T-shirt.
Exhibits 231 from 241.
Thank you. Mr. Lally, we have a few minutes before lunch. Do you intend to display some?
I think maybe.
If you do it quickly, do it now.
Um,
If you're not, we'll take a break. Jurors, we're going to take the luncheon break. I'm going to see counsel at sidebar.
Oh, gonna see counsel at sidebar.
All rise for the court, please.
Which means she's probably gonna complain about all the time that's being taken. Well, I can't say that. There we are. That's the official conclusion of the morning. Yeah. Yeah. Official conclusion of the morning. Told you this girl was going to be on here all day. Now, I understand. You know, I'm not stupid. I do understand foundation has to be laid. But I'm telling you, nearly 80% of everything that Lally has done could have been streamlined. That's why I call him the Botox prosecutor, because he's using all kinds of filler and making things look bigger than what they are. So we've had Kevin Ohara, who was part of the CERT team or in charge of the CERT team. They found out all the, pieces of taillight in the shoe, majority of which was right there where that Ford, I want to say Ford Zero, but there is no such thing. But right where it was parked, and the snowplow guy couldn't make a pass because the car was in the way. There's too much suspicious stuff. Too much. And this lady, Maureen Hartnett, she's doing her job the best she can, but if she doesn't have all the correct information and she doesn't do all the tests, and this is 3 months after the incident that she gets this stuff to examine, too suspicious. Okay, go get something to eat. Go run around, go play with your doggy or your kitty cat or whatever, and come back for the afternoon when you're ready. If you'll ever be ready.